far as our background with respect to ministry revealed and the path that revealed and the path that we've been on, for me anyways, it's been since 2021, I think. So almost 3 years now. I don't know how long you've been involved with the ministry.
I think it's about 6 years now. Okay, I think it was from about early 2018,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around there. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So,
You've certainly got me
oh,
beat, in terms of some of the earlier work with the ministry. And to be honest with you, I haven't gone back and to the earlier videos and studied a lot of that. So, as far as things that were discussed early on, I don't usually have a background as deep as some of the other people in the ministry. But I think that, Alan's recordings tend to be kind of repetitive in some respects, which is good because I always like to say repetition equals certainty. So there's a lot of things that he does cover routinely and throughout his videos that touch on things that happened in the previous years. And so the reason I was intrigued with your finding of this 6 days, as I mentioned, and to be honest with you, I haven't found those days yet. I've watched your videos a couple times, and for some reason it's eluding me. So I was hoping that maybe we could spend a little time. You can talk about those extra 6 to 7 days, I think you said, with respect to the 390 and 40. So that's kind of what with the impetus of what brought this about, and obviously in the text or the email I sent you or the instant message I sent you, why it interests me. We can cover that.
yeah, no, for sure. We'll definitely go through that. I'll try and explain exactly how how I came to understand that there's an extra 6 days over and above the 390 and the 40. And in fact, there's a lead-in of 7 days as well. And we'll have a look at the Ezekiel chapter. It really starts into chapter 1, and it goes all the way through to chapter 8, although the bulk of it is in chapter 4. But the two dates are given to us in Ezekiel 1 and 8, if I recall correctly. And those are like the two bookmarks or the two bookends for the whole story. Those are the only two dates that we're given. And it's a very interesting story. It goes way back. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to get right into that. I mean, that's obviously we'll go through that. Is there anything else? We also want to have a look at you want to make a connection, or you think that there may be a connection between the 390 days and possibly the 2,300 days in Daniel 8.
Yeah, we'll pick up that after we get through what you have.
Okay.
And I don't know if there is a connection there with that or not. But with something we can look at later.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's get straight into the Ezekiel story then.
You want me to
I think
share the
yeah,
screen?
I think yeah, allow maybe if you can allow me to share screen, and then I'll bring up the scriptures, and then we'll have a look at it, and I'll try and take you through that.
All right. You should be able to share now.
All right, you should be able to see eSword. You got eSword on your screen now, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a very straightforward. The kickoff here is in Ezekiel 1. We are told there that in the 13th year, it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month. Now, this 13th year, it doesn't say what it is, but it was in there when you get to understand the story. This was the 13th year of captivity. In other words, from when Ezekiel went into captivity, in the 13th year of his captivity. Now he went into captivity at the same time as Jehoiakim went into captivity, which was about, if I recall correctly, about 8 years after Daniel went into captivity. I can bring up later on, I'll bring up the chronology, and I'll be able to show you exactly the years difference between when Daniel went into captivity. And Daniel was part of that first group that went into captivity. And then later on, there was another group, and then there was some other groups, and then it was only, I think it was about 20 years about 20 years after Daniel went to captivity, then only was the temple destroyed, and the rest went into captivity, and many people obviously were killed at that point in time. But that was well after Daniel had already been in captivity for some years. So just to put it into context, Ezekiel it was about 30 years old when he started receiving prophecies, etc. And we'll have a look. We'll see exactly where that fits in as well. And so this was in his 13th year of captivity. And the key thing here is that it was in the fourth month and the fifth day of the month. And he gets this vision, and he sees the glory of the Lord. He repeats it twice. He says, in the fifth day of the month. He doesn't specify the fourth month, but we know it's the fifth day of the fourth month because he's already told us in the previous verse. And this was the fifth year of King Jehoiakim's captivity. Sorry, I need to just correct myself. This 13th year, this was his fifth year of captivity. It was the 13th year. I'll pick up on that one now. I just can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at this. I'll show you where that 13th year comes in now. But he went into captivity with together with Joy. So it was his fifth year of captivity. I'll show you on the chronology where the 13th year comes in now. But the important thing for the calculation on the 390, the 40, and the extra 6 days is really between this day here, the fifth day of the fourth month, and then the next date that we're given. Okay, so we're going to give him quite a bit of information, but we have to go on to the 8th chapter. And this is now after he had done the enactment. The enactment was complete, and the Lord had shown him on the last day. This is now when he gets to, well, this is now when he gets shown all the terrible things that they were up to in the temple. The Lord takes him in the spirit, and he shows them all these things that are going on in Jerusalem, the idol worship and all that, and he shows them. And this occurs in the 6th year of his captivity. So it's 1 year on, okay, and it's in the 6th month, and it's the 5th day of the 6th month. So it's the 5th day of the 6th month, the very next year. So we saw in the first date it was the 5th year. Now it's in the 6th year, and in the 5th year of his captivity, when the whole thing started, it was the 4th month, and now it's the 6th month. Now we know that there was between those two dates. There's no question. Nobody can argue. There was 390 days plus the 40. There's 430 days. That have to be fitted in between those 430 days between those two dates.
Oh,
and we see that now. This is one of the interesting things, because this is the one story. There are two stories, the flood story and this story, that prove without a shadow of a doubt that there has to be from time to time a 13th month. Otherwise, you just simply cannot fit in the 430 days. In a normal month, in a normal 12-month year, there are in the Hebrew calendar there are 354 days. And then what happens is they have to make that correction.
How many days did you say?
354 days.
354?
Sometimes 354, yeah.
Okay.
So that's based on the cycles of the moon. There are 12 complete cycles in 354 days.
Okay.
And but it's less than the 365. So you got this 11-day difference between what the sun cycle and the moon cycle. So what they do is every year they would lose those 11 days they would accumulate. The next year there would be now another 11 days short, also another 354, which is still another 11 days short of the 365, and then another year they've now accumulated 33 days. So then they add another month. to bring the two cycles together back to in line with one another. Now, I just want to say this right up front. This is not a man-made thing. I've done it. I'm not going to go into great detail now because it's quite a lengthy explanation. But the sun and the moon and the stars actually govern exactly when that extra month gets added. And I've proven that by calculation, by the using the cycle of the sun, moon, and against the stars to show that the 19-year Metonic cycle. So that when they add that extra month in, sometimes there's 3 years go by and then they add another month, and sometimes there's 2 years to go by and they add another month. And there are very specific years in that 19-year cycle, the Metonic cycle. There are very specific years that they add. I think I'm going by memory now, but I think it's in the 3rd year. I'm speaking under correction now. I think it's the 3rd year, the 5th year, maybe I can look at that up later. But they are in that 19 year, there are very specific years, and at first glance it appears to be a man-made thing. But later on, I can show you by calculation that it actually follows the cycle of the sun, moon against the stars perfectly, and the sun, moon, and stars determine when that cycle, that Metonic cycle, is driven by the sun, moon against as they move in relation to the stars. So it's not a man-made thing. God created it. God, now, so the point I'm trying to make is.
Do you mind if I interject something quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, could I just interject something quick there? When we're talking about doing a count of days, whether it's the 390 plus 40, they may or may not be consecutive days, but when you're talking about one versus the other, let's say 390 days, it doesn't matter if you're counting it on a Gregorian calendar or a Zendok calendar or a Jewish calendar. There's still 390 consecutive days, correct?
Yes. No, look, I would concede the count of days is not, it doesn't actually determine, you can't determine the calendar from the days. It's 390 days that he had to lie on his one side, and they were consecutive days because the Lord said he was going to be bound for those days, and he wasn't allowed to turn from his, I think he started off on his left side first, and then it was his right side, if I recall correctly. We can check that. But he was bound for those days. They were definitely 390 consecutive, and then 40 consecutive.
Right.
Now, whether it went straight from the 390 and he turned over and it goes straight from the 390 to the 40, or whether there's a gap between the 390 and the 40, the scriptures are not clear. And that was what I tried to explain in my previous video. There may have been a gap, or there may have been 390 and immediately the very next day he starts, or once the 390 is complete, he starts on the 40 to complete the 430 days. The point I'm just trying to highlight here is, in a normal year, even if you just base it on a Zendok calendar or whatever, there's 365. We've got 430 days here. You cannot on any calendar except the 13-month calendar, you cannot get from the 5th day of the 4th month to the 5th day of the 6th month in a 12-month period. It doesn't. Well, 12 plus 1. You're going. Well, even if you add the extra month, we're going from the 4th. If you go to the following year, so you're going. Let's say from the 1 year, the 5th day of the 4th month, and you go to the following year, the 1st day of the 4th month. That's 365 days. Would you agree with me?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean,
right. So we got 300. Yeah. But now we got it now. Sorry. So go where he starts. He starts now. Let's assume he starts immediately when he's given the instruction. Well, actually, he's given the instruction, and then there's a 7-day period. We'll actually see that he actually sees there's a 7-day. So we actually got to fit 437 days in between, because this date we are given. He sees this vision. He sees this vision of the. Sorry, let's just go back to chapter 1. He sees the glory of the Lord is it seems to be like a mobile throne of some sort. He sees this amazing vision with these 4 living creatures and all the things that they do. And then he's told to, then he basically is dumbfounded. He goes and he goes home, and he's then told by the Lord to meet him in the plain. So let me just see. There was a 7-day break between seeing this vision of the glory of the Lord and then meeting him in the plain. I just want to see where's the meeting in the plain. Okay, he calls because go forth into the plain. He says, then the Lord and the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he said to me, arise, go forth into the plain. Okay, and there was you see it came to pass. Yeah, here's the 7 days. Okay, so and it came to pass at the end of 7 days. All right, so he's told to go. Let's just go back to Ezekiel 3:15. Right, when I came to them of the captivity in Tel Aviv, that dwelt by the river of Chebar, and I sat there where they sat and remained astonished among them 7 days. So after seeing this amazing vision, he sits here for 7 days and he's stunned. And then it came to pass after the end of 7 days that the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman. Go unto the house of Israel, therefore hear the word of the Lord by mouth, and he said, etc. And it goes on, and he says, and the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he said unto me, arise, go forth into the plain, and I will there talk with thee. And then he goes into the plain, and this is where he gets his instructions. In the plain, he gets the instructions about the 390 and the 40 days. Okay, so we've got a date. First date is the 5th day of the 4th month. 7 days later, he's told to go into the plain, and he gets the instructions for the 390 and the 40 days on the left and the right side, right? Now, whether he goes the very next day and starts that process, we're not told, but we must assume, I don't think it'll be unreasonable to assume that he immediately starts with this enactment of the 390, and that it probably follows immediately with the 40. Okay, so we've got a total so far of 7, then 390, and then 40. That's 437 days. And then we're given another, after all of that, we're given the final date of the 5th day of the 6th month. So it starts on the 5th day of the 4th month. And if you go through to the next year, to the 4th month, the 5th day, that would be 365 days, right? Because that's a year on.
Right.
365 is still short of the 437. We're looking for, what would that be? 35 and another 37. 72 days, if I'm not mistaken. We can just confirm that. So we've got 437 minus 365. Yeah, 72 days. Now, so from the 5th day of the 4th month to the 5th day of the 6th month is 2 months. That means it's probably about, well, depending how long the calendar month is, but let's say it's about 30 days each. On the Hebrew calendar, it'll be 29 and 30, because one of them would be 29, the other one would have been 30. So there's 59 days, but we can't fit the 72. You can't fit it in.
Oh, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? So you said there was 354 days on a Hebrew calendar for a year.
Yeah, but I'm just ignoring all calendars at this stage.
Okay.
Let's just go by the sun.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
We got 365, and I'm just saying, just ignore. Let's just say we got a year, right? We got 437 days, of which, let's say, okay, let's knock off the year. 365. We can argue whatever calendar it is. There's 365. Put it aside. The sun is now back where it was a year ago. In the 5th day of the 4th month, we've got a remaining 72 days. Okay. But now we've only got 2 months. So from the 5th day of the 4th month, and he's finished, and his final date is the 5th day of the 6th month, that's 2 months. Now, if it's 30 days on average in a month, that's about 60 days. Even if it was a 31 day and a 30 day a month, that would be 61 days. You're still short uh, ele- uh, uh, um, 11 days in the 72. You can't get 72 in. So you can see that no matter even the Zendok calendar or whatever calendar you got, you can't get the 337 days in between those two dates. The only one you can get it where it fits is in the Hebrew calendar where there's an extra month. Because what happens then? If there's an extra month, then it's no longer then the year is no longer 354 days. It's 384 days. In fact, sometimes it's 384, sometimes it's 383. There's a day difference, and it depends on the sun, moon, and star positioning. But let's just on most of them are 384. Occasionally, it's 383. But let's go work with 384. So we've got 384 days of the 437. So we can take now again. We've got 437 is the total we're looking for. We can knock off in a long year on a Hebrew calendar 384, and we're left with 53 days. Okay. Now we got to fit in. So 53 days, that would take us now in a long year. It would take us from the 5th day of the 4th month to the following year, 5th day of the 4th month. But there's an extra month in it. That's why we got, so there's 384 days between those two dates, because it's a long year. Okay. Do you follow what I'm saying? I haven't got any diagrams here I wonder if I have got a diagram. I'm just trying to think if I actually have done a diagram on this. But are you following me so far, Brian? If you're going to go from the 5th day of the 4th month to the 5th day of the 4th month in the following year, and it was a long year, there's 384 days between those two dates, right?
Right. So
You've got a remainder.
We got 13 months based on a lunar calendar.
Yeah, you have 13 months. So there's 384 days between 5th day of the 4th month in the one year and the 5th day of the 4th month in the following year. That's 384 days that we can knock off.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yep.
And we've got 2 months left, which on a Hebrew calendar would be 59 days. There's 2 calendars, 2 months. One of them definitely would have been a 29 day. The other one would definitely have been a 30 day. So we definitely got 59 days. Now, can you fit 53 days in the 59?
Sure.
Yes. And you've got 6 left. That's where the extra 6 days is. So
okay, I gotcha.
So there's an extra 6 days. So you can fit the remaining 53 in the 59 that you've got to bring you to the 5th day of the 6th month. But you've got a remainder. You've got a remainder, and I'm not counting the last day. In other words, the 5th day of the 6th month where it ends, I'm not counting that day. If you're supposed to count that day, well, then it's 7 days spare. That's why I say you've got 6, possibly 7 days spare in the whole story. Now, where do you put those? Where do you put those 6 or 7 days? Were they at the end?
Be the week of the plane, right?
No, I've discounted the week of the plane. You must remember we've already counted. We worked on 437 days.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked on 437 days. So we've counted the week of the plane. So over and above the week of the plane, we've got this other week. Where was it? Where did it? He ended? The whole story ends on the 5th day of the 6th month, and he's now taken and he's shown all these things that are happening in Jerusalem and in the temple and all these the idol worship that's happening, and the Lord shows him all these things, and then the story moves on. You can see why he's showing. This is why I'm now going to judge these people. This is why I'm gonna. This is besides the fact of the iniquity, because we're told that the 390 days was representative of the iniquity of the house of Israel for 390 years, a day for a year, and we're told that the 40 days was representative of the iniquity of the house of Judah for 40 years, a day for a year. So we know that the house of Israel was we can understand how they the 430 days relates to 430 years of iniquity on the part of the two houses. Again, then in my previous video, I was trying to say, okay, well, where are those 390 years and where are those 40 years that actually happened that are related to the 390 days and the 40 days. So, but that's a different story. The point still remains, you've got these 6 extra, 7 or possibly 7 extra days, if you count the last day in the equation. Where do you put them? Did they occur between the 390 and the 40 and you were just not told about it? Or did he finish and then he was off for a week, he was done for a week, and then only we are told that he's now before the elders on this 5th day of the 6th month, and we're never told anything about this extra 7 days.
Right.
Where do we put it?
Yeah.
So that's when I then. Sorry, yeah, I should.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you had a question.
Where would you put them? I mean, you could put them at the beginning. You could put them in the middle between the 390 and the 40, or you could put them at the end.
Exactly. We know it's not in the, it was 390 complete and was 40 complete. But as you say, okay, he was 7 days in the plane, and then he might have had another week of preparation before he started the 390. That's possible. So he has a week of preparation, and then he does the 390, and then he immediately does the 40, and the last day of the 40 is the 5th day of the 6th month. And then the Lord shows him all the iniquity that's happening in Jerusalem. That's a possibility. So it can be at the beginning. It can be a break between the two, which he never tells us about. Or it can be at the end. We don't know. And that's when I started saying, okay, well, where is the 390 and the 40? Can that story maybe tell us where these 6 days or 7 days actually fit in? And that's what I tried to show, that in the actual chronology of things, the 6 years were after the 390 in 2 instances, depending on which years you call the 390. But there was definitely seemed to be a possible 6 years after the 390. And in one of the instances in that video, I showed that if you start from Solomon, if the 390 starts from Solomon, maybe I should just bring that chronology up, because then it can relate to it much better.
Yeah, and of course we're relating the beginning of the count of the 390 starting October 7th, 2023. Which
well, that's the interesting thing. Now, if October 7th would have been the 8th day of Tabernacles. Sorry, sorry. Yeah, so there were 7 days before. Let me just. So there were 7 days before the 7th of October, and they were the 7 days of Tabernacles, which kind of is interesting because it ties in with those 7 days before he went to the plain. After seeing the vision of the throne, he waits 7 days in astonishment. Then he goes to the plain and he gets his instructions. The 7 days fits exactly where in our times now, if the 390 started on the 7th of October, there were exactly 7 days from the beginning of Tabernacles to the end of Tabernacles, and they started on the 8th day, which exactly 7 days before, which fits exactly that portion of 7 days that he was before he went into the plain. And that I found very interesting. So then we can, and if we run the 390 count, now the question was, these 390, is it do you have to see the 390 through in the end time understanding? Is it 390 and then followed by 40? Or is it 350 and then the last 40 of the 2 instances run in consecutively, so for a total of 390? Or if they're sequential, then it'll be a total of 430. And obviously, I looked at that time we were looking for events at the 350-day mark, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, maybe it's sequential. So we're pressing on. And as we sit here right now, we have not completed the 40 days. We haven't completed the 430 days. I think we're sitting at the moment on 410 days, somewhere around there, since October 7.
Yeah, I think we're just a hair over 20 days, or I'm sorry, under 20 days from now. So
from the 430.
Yeah.
So 437, if you count from the beginning of Tabernacles, and 430 if you count from the 8th day of after Tabernacles. So that brings us to the end of the 430 count. I think ends on the 10th of December, somewhere around there. The 9th or the 10th of December ends the 430-day count.
Right, right.
So what we're looking at is to say, well, is this an end time count applicable to us as well? In other words, is just like it was a warning for the house of Judah that Ezekiel enacted before the destruction of the temple, he enacted this thing. Okay, now I just want to pause a second and just get this chronology. No, this is an eye test. I'm going to try and, I don't know, can you see it okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to try and, I'm trying not to complicate this thing too much. But I want to just show you where, so we're going to step back a bit. All right. Daniel, this is the beginning of the 70-year count from when Daniel and his group went into captivity. And that was that happened, yeah, when Nebuchadnezzar took the reign. He was co-rex with his father Nabopolassar, or whatever case may be. That's when they and the scripture relates there is it was in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. That was the key marker.
Hmm.
Jehoiakim, there's Jehoiakim's, and we know in this chronology we've got we've the biblical, this timeline of all the kings. They all, we can actually, we know exactly where the 3rd year of Jehoiakim was. So in his 3rd year is when Daniel went into captivity. So that clearly ties in. So, and you can see that Daniel was already 8 years in captivity. And then this is when Ezekiel went into captivity together with Jehoiakim. And that would have occurred, and there is a scriptural reference, I think, for that. I don't want to spend too much, but it was in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So 2 Kings 24:12, see, in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. And we've all got that all charted down. So Nebuchadnezzar's 8th year is there. And so we know these things all link in. It's actually such an amazing thing to understand the biblical chronology, how all these connections, these years of the kings, and that every single one, they all tie into one another. They gridlock into one another. You can't get it wrong. If you plot it out like Reverend Martin Anstey did this in the year, well, he must have done it before 1913, because he published his book in 1913. So he must have done this in the early 1900s. And he did a brilliant job, because all of these things tied in, and I've checked it out. I've tried to find some, if there's any errors, and I can't find any errors in his chronology. So I think this is right. What he's got here is 100% right. So we've got in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar is when Ezekiel. Now we read there that in his 5th year. Remember, we read there that in his 5th year of captivity, eh?
Yep.
So there we have it. There's his 5th year. And there's the scriptural reference that was Ezekiel 1 in the 5th day of the 4th month of the 5th year of Jehoiakim's captivity. Then he received this vision of the 390 years and the 40 years. So now the interesting thing is, and this is where he was 30 years old, eh? This is in his 30th year. There's another scriptural reference that we can clearly mark. It says in his 30th year. Where is it here? I don't know if I'll find it here. Year of it's also in Ezekiel 1. It must be there. I just miss it in his 30th year. Or did I misread it? Sorry. I
No.
might have. I think. Oh, sorry. I misread this. I read it as 13, and that's why I've got 13 stuck in my brain. In his 30th year, in the 30th year, that's why I missed the connection. Sorry if I'd read it. I misread it. In the 30th year and the 5th year of the captivity. What is this 30th year? That was the thing that baffled me for a long time. And that's in the 30th year was his 30th year. He was 30 years old when he got this vision. He was 30, and that's where that connection. And he had the fifth year. That's his 30th year, and so he had been prophesying. Basically, if you go back 30, Ezekiel started prophesying when Josiah was king. Josiah was the king that cleaned up. You remember, he was the good king that cleaned up. There's a couple of things that he did. They found the scroll in the temple. He started cleaning the temple out. They found the scroll. They read it. They started putting those things. He started getting rid of all the idols. He did all of that. And anyway, so it was in his 17th year. That's when Ezekiel was born. So that's the count of the 30. So he's 30 years old, and now he receives the vision of the 390 and the 40. So the question now still goes back, where is the 390 and the 40 years actually? Because remember, we told 390 years of iniquity on the house of Israel. Where is that? And in my previous video, I tried to see there were two possibilities. Reverend Martin Anstey suggested that it was, it's plotted here. There's the end of the 390, and he takes that 390 years going back. So we have to go to another sheet, to the next sheet back, and here's the continuation. So there's the 390 continuation. I think so. Let me just check.
Yep.
Have I jumped too far? Yeah. So 358 is the last, and then there's 357, and it carries on. It carries on, and it goes right up there. And there's the first year, and that started exactly where Rehoboam and Jeroboam became king, and this was where the house of Israel and Judah split into two nations. If we go one back, so he thought, Reverend Martin Anstey thought that event was the house, the iniquity of the house of Israel. He thought started there. And if that was the case, it's interesting that the 390 ended exactly when in the year that Ezekiel received the vision. There's the end of the 390, from when they split into two, and it's the 5th year of his captivity, and that's when he received the vision. That was his idea. But if we take that one and we see then when did the temple get destroyed, we see there's exactly 6 years. That's these 6 years there. There's 6 years, and then in the 7th year, this is when the temple was destroyed. Okay. And there are scriptural references for that. It was in the 9th day of the 4th month of the 11th month. There was famine in the land. And that was the 11th year of Zedekiah. So if you go and this is where a lot of people get confused, because Zedekiah's got 11, there's Zedekiah's 11th year in that one. That's Zedekiah. He was the last king. Zedekiah, he was the last king for 11 years. So it was his 11th year was the destruction of the temple. But there's a cross reference. It was in the 12th year. Let me just see. There's another date. Jeremiah, it was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. It was another date that was given, and that was where's Nebuchadnezzar? It's the blue column. Nebuchadnezzar's column is the blue one. That's in his 19th year, which is the 11th year of. So that's a reference. That's a reference in the same year. And I think there was also another one. There was in Ezekiel 32. That was the vision of the slain, fallen by the sword. Now I just want to see. Yeah, here it is. On the 5th day of the 10th month of the 12th year of Jehoiakim's captivity. That was in Ezekiel 33. So we've got 3 references. So we've got the 12th year of Jehoiakim's captivity, which would have also been the 12th year of Ezekiel's captivity. And where's their captivity? It's this. There's their captivity. Remember, we saw there in the 5th year, he received the vision, and 12 years on, in the 12th year, that's when the temple was destroyed. There's no doubt at all that that was when the temple was destroyed. We've got 3 references that all line up. 11th year of Zedekiah, 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, and 12th year of Jehoiakim's captivity. We know that there was 6-year gap between the end of the 390. So that was in the seventh year. In the seventh year, see, there's a 6-year gap. There's where the 390 ended, and then you can count 6 years, and then in the seventh year, the temple is destroyed.
Interesting.
So that's when I thought, okay, we've got 6 days after. Is this showing us is this where the 6 days fits in after the 390? That's a possibility. You've got 6 years. Remember, we've got a day to year situation. Yeah, we've got a day to year situation for those 6 days, 6 extra days.
Right.
That's the one option. Now the 40 years for Judah is not sequential, because yes, the 390, and you would expect it a sequential, but there's no 40. The 40 years actually happened in reality. It seems they happened. They were partially. They happened not sequentially, but what's the word I'm looking for? They happened together. Okay. The 40 years. Yes.
The 430, the 430 as opposed to just 40.
You got the 390, and then you got the 40. Remember, now the 40 days was also related to 40 years of the iniquity of the house of Judah. Now, here's the destruction of the temple here. It's very interesting that this is the end of the 40 years where Jeremiah had been prophesying for 40 years. We know that Jeremiah had been prophesying his first year of prophesying. That's his second year. It's under this. We'll go and have a look at it now. And we have to go one tab on, and we have to find. It's at the bottom here. There it is. There. Sorry, it's just the 1 year on its own. Remember, we had 40. We had 2. So there's the 1, and this was where Jeremiah began to prophesy, and the scripture reference there was in 1 Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah, not 1 Jeremiah. Jeremiah 25:3. I didn't actually. We can go and have a look at that. He began to prophesy 23 years. We can go and have a look. Let's just go and have a look at the scripture. Jeremiah 25:3. Just to show that we're not. This is not 25:3. There, from the 13th year of Josiah, the king of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even unto this day, that is the sorry, I'm just going to move this thing out the way. That is the 23rd year, so it's the 23rd year, that the word of the Lord hath come unto me. So the word had been coming to him for 23 years, and that I have spoken unto you, rising early and speaking, but you have not hearkened, you have not heard. So from the 13th year of Josiah, you can count forward 23 years. And this is when Jeremiah 23 was referring. It was written in the 23rd year, but he's saying from this particular date. So in his total of 40, in the 23rd year, he said, you guys are not listening to me. I've been speaking to you now since the 13th year of Josiah for 23 years, and you guys are not listening to me. That's basically what that verse says. Okay.
Right. Yep.
So if we go to we can go to the chronology, and we can find Josiah's 13th year. See, Josiah came in. There's Josiah, and there's his 13th year. So there's the first year that Jeremiah started prophesying, and we can count forward 23 years from there. Okay, so we know in the 13th, that's his year 1. Then 2, 3, 4. Then in the 23rd year, that's where that reference, actually, you'll find that reference here again. 25, 1 there, 23rd, 23. Let me just move this up again. Let's see, just see that. So that's 23. It's just in here. Should be 25, 1 to 3 is the 13th year of Josiah. It's a double reference, just referring the 23 years from the 13th year of Josiah. That's when he wrote this, of course. So he said, that's when he said it. In his 23rd year, I've been warning you now for 23 years, and you're not listening to me. And in any case, so you can go in the scriptures, and he carries on and on and on, and eventually the temple is destroyed. So we know the beginning part. We know exactly in the 13th year. So from the 13th year of Josiah to when the temple was destroyed was exactly 40 years. That, I believe, was in the iniquity of the house of Judah. Jeremiah had been prophesying them for 40 years now, and they did not listen to him. That was their iniquity. For 40 years he had been warning them, and they completely ignored him, and the Lord had had enough. And that was the end of the story for so even before all of that, and this was in spite of the fact that all these other guys had gone into exile. Daniel was in exile already by that stage. By the time the temple was destroyed, he had been in exile 19 years. It was in his 20th year of Daniel's 20th year that in captivity when the temple was destroyed. Ezekiel had been 12 years in captivity when the temple was destroyed. And in spite of all those events, they still wouldn't listen to him. In the 40 days of Ezekiel, the 40 years of iniquity for the house of Judah is the 40 year of Jeremiah's prophecies. I'm fairly certain of that. So if that is the case, and we have a sequential, we can go back to the beginning of that 40 years. There it is there. Okay. And then I said, well, how do you fit in 390 before this? Because we know he was 390 days tied, and then he was tied up for 40 days. So there should be a sequential story to this thing, actually. So I started looking for 390 days and it was just interesting that if you go as far back to the beginning of King Solomon, when King Solomon became king, now that's where they split. King Solomon had been reigning for 40 years. So in the 41st year is when when Israel and Judah split into two. So we can just go back. Let's just go to the one tab before that. There's the end of the 40 years of the reign of King Solomon. Yeah, there's King Solomon. There's his 40 years of reign.
Yep.
Okay, and then immediately after his 40 years, they split into two. That's on the next sheet. So if I take the 390, and it's very interesting. So if I take the 390 back to start when King Solomon came into reign, and I count 390 years from when King Solomon came into reign, that's very, very interesting how there it is. Let's just go down. Sorry, it's not that tab. That's okay. Let me just go back. So it's King Solomon's 40, right?
Yep.
That's 40 of the 390. So let's jump. I think it's this tab here. There's 41 of the 390. Now is when they split the two sons. And then we carry on counting the 390, and it all goes down in this column here. 390. There's the end of the 390. There's the first year of the 40. There's the end of the 390 when you count from when Solomon became king. And it's so interesting that there's exactly 6 years between those. Exactly 6 years. So we saw in the previous option that it was the 390 was followed by 6 years, and then the destruction of the temple. And then in this case, we've also got a 6 years after the 390, but then the 40 starts. And his 40th actually ended on the 5th day of the 6th month. His 40th day of his enactment. So I just felt that was very interesting. So in the end times, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to correlate and fit that in. I mean, it was it's a super idea to do that, to add the 390 and the 40 from what we thought was the dung year, the beginning of the dung year at the end of Tabernacles, and get to where we presently are now. But what the thing that kind of piqued my interest was the 6 to 7 days, and I looked at that maybe being tacked on to the end, at the end of the 390 plus 40, and it seemed it's almost like it fit with the wedding week of where the 390 and the 40, the 430 days would end based on the calendar that I was kind of assimilating with. So I don't know if you probably thought of that as well, I'm sure.
Yes, no, obviously that's where I kind of, at this point in time, if we take the 430, we take the 430 days from the 7th of October, including the 7th. So 7th October is day one. Then, well, we can actually just, I can just open it quickly. We want to, so let's say now this is, yeah, I'll just say, if you want to include the 7th of October in the account, you must enter the day before. And I'll prove it to you. So it's the 6th of the 10th of 2023. Okay. And we want to, oh, sorry, let me just change that to add days. So we want to add 390, or let's just say 430.
Yeah. We found that what was interesting is that when you did the 390, it basically brought you to November 1st, which was,
yeah, okay, let's do the 390 then.
yeah, that brought you to November 1st, 2024.
Yeah, well, November 1st.
Oh,
if you do not include,
oh, that's why.
I was trying. If you do not, I'll show you here. If you look at the first month, I've picked the 6th. You see that it's taken 25 days of this month. Okay, so there's 31 days. Minus 6 would be 25. So these days are including the 6 is not. So the 7th is now included in the count.
I see.
You get it?
Yes. Okay.
If you enter 7 here and you recalculate, you'll see that now it's 24 days. So that means the 7th is not included in the count. So that's why if you want, and I do believe, and it's up for debate, but I believe that the 7th should be included in the count. The Jews are certainly counting it as day one. In their war count, they're counting it as day one because it was the first day. It was the first day that the hostages were taken, and that was day one. So they certainly are including it in the count. And when you include the count, then you get to 30th of October for the end of the 390.
Well, that's the end of the end of the 30th day, which would be split between the 30th and the
the end of including, I think the 30th is included. Let's go to the last day. Yeah, because 30 days, you see the 30th is included.
Yes.
So in this case, the 7th of October is included, and the 30th of October the following year is included.
Right.
And that was so. And then, of course, if you go the full 340, which is the 390 plus the 30, then you get to 9 December. So we're including the 7th, and we get to including, so 9 December, which is, so that means
to the end of 9, to the end of
end of 9. That means on the 10th, on the 10th of December, the 430 days are complete.
Right.
The 9th of December is still part of the 430-day count. So 10 December. Now, when we go to the Hebrew calendar, I think 10 December is the 10th day of the 9th month, if I recall correctly. So I've added the Jews' days as well, so that we can just see. So December 10, 24 is the 9th day of the 9th month. 9th day of the 9th month. That is so interesting as far as I'm concerned, and I'd like to see what you guys do. But when we know that the 9th day of the 5th month is such an important day. I mean, this whole story of Ezekiel was all about leading up to the destruction of the temple. We know that the temple was destroyed on the 9th or the 10th day of the 5th month. In Jeremiah recorded it as the 10th day of the 5th month, and elsewhere in 2 Kings, I think it was recorded as the 9th day of the 5th month. So we know 9/10 of the 5th month is such and this happens to be exactly the end of the 430-day count is exactly on that 9/10 day of the 9th month. And that's when I started, hang on a second, there's something going on here. And for a long time, then it dawned on me, and it's very strange how these things happen, because it came to mind, and I think I posted on the forum that, we've got this, our Lord, Jesus said, You say the harvest is in 4 months, and I say the harvest is ready now. So he's got this 4 month connection. And I said, but hang on a second. The ninth month minus 4 gives me 5. So is the ninth of the ninth month actually, in the Lord's eyes, the ninth of the 5th month? Very interesting. That's exactly the day that we're looking for. We know that the temple was destroyed on that day. Is the Lord's, in the Lord's eyes, this the true ninth day of the 5th month? And it's also the end. Exactly now the 430 days are complete. And is this when the first attack happens? On the ninth day of the 5th month in his eyes, which happens to be the ninth day of the ninth month on the Jews' calendar. So that's where that really, and then we can build on from that.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at your calendar.
Okay. Yeah, and just to kind of build on what you just said with respect to the 4 months, there can be layers to that. It's been said that the time that Christ said that was when he was meeting the woman at the well, and she had gone back and told that Christ was here, and then all the people came out of the town to meet him, and they were coming towards Christ and the disciples, and they saw them coming, and that was the harvest that he was talking about 4 months earlier. But I mean, that's just one point of view, but certainly jumping back 4 months could also mean something else back to the 5th month. So, all right, let me just grab my. Let's see.
Yeah, we must delve into that at some point. And I don't know if you want to go through your calendar first before we go,
Let's
because I
do
think
that. Because I want to get into that 2,300 days. All right, share. All right. So I'll start here, screen 2.
Are we going to go to John? Are we going to go and have a look at John 4? Or what do you want to do now?
I thought we'd just finish up with the calendar stuff.
Okay, you want to finish the calendars, and then we'll come back to John 4, and we'll try and put a timing to this. We'll go into the whole discussion.
Yeah.
Of when exactly in the year did Jesus say that, and we can spend a bit of time on that. Okay, awesome. All right, so you take the screen back.
Okay.
And
can you see my screen now?
I need to. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share on this side. There you go.
This is where I had originally had the end of the 390 plus 40. It was December 10th, but you could have it you could theoretically say it's the 9th, end of the 9th, start on the 10th.
Yeah, you didn't include the 7th day of October. I think when you did your calculation, it's probably you might not have included the 7th day of October in that, and that's what then put you on the 10th of December.
But what's interesting?
I'm okay.
Yeah, but
I'm okay with that.
Okay, I'm just going to put that there for now.
Yeah, 100%.
So I figuring that the 7-day to 8-day wedding, and then the 40 days of the Son of Man, and then the 3 days of the Holy Ghost back down into January, and that's probably kind of what you had based on the teaching that Alan at Ministry Revealed is, and what they've discovered there. So the reason I have Hanukkah day 1 here is because this is where it lands on the Zendok calendar.
Yeah, they got it there. Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah, so they've on the Jewish calendar they would have Hanukkah starting on the 15th day of the 9th month, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is so the Jewish on the Jews calendar, they have Hanukkah on the 26th of December, landing on the
and it's the 24th day of the 9th month. That's what 24th day of the 9th month. But on the Zendok calendar, they say it's not the 24th day of the 9th month. That's what, or is this the 24th day of the 9th month on the Zendok calendar?
Yeah, well, we can look at that right now. Let me just make sure I'm in 2020. Okay, so here's let's see. Okay, so here's Kislev 2024.
Yeah.
Okay. And Hanukkah beginning on the 25th day.
Okay. So they call it the 24th day of the Sorry, I'm a bit of a stickler on that one. Let me just say right up front, I do not refer to the names of the months that the Hebrews have called it.
Okay.
Um, so just bear with me. I'm going to call it the ninth month. That's the way I believe the Lord originally intended it to be
Okay.
by number. So, but it is Kislev for those that still follow the name. It's the 24th day of Kislev. Is that right? And on the Zendok calendar, the 24th day is on the 10th of December, which is so they start Hanukkah the next day. Whereas the Jews say that the 24th day of Kislev is actually on the 24th of December, so 2 weeks later.
Yeah,
There's
I think
there's a
it's
2 week difference between the Jews calendar
yeah.
and this calendar, the Zendok calendar. There's a 2 weeks.
So we're
The
talking.
Zendok is
I think it's like 15 days, quite actually, though, if I remember.
30.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. All
okay.
right. So, so I found that interesting with respect to the seeing as that
Yeah.
Hanukkah being the festival of lights, and again, it's basically a festival, uh, and a time we know that Christ comes as light when he comes back. Um, and I also looked at the moon phases in that month, and they are full for like 3 or 4 days in the midst of Hanukkah, which I found interesting this year.
Um, yeah, the exact date of full moon, I think it would be the 15th of December, I think. Yeah. I
Yep,
think the
yeah,
15th
around
of
there.
December is the full moon. Yeah.
Yeah, they call it a cold moon in December, and there's basically 3 days, I guess, that it looks full,
Yeah.
and so
Okay. So the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th of Hanukkah would be basically full moon,
yeah,
time of full moon on, and
yeah,
that lines up with the 4th, 5th, and 6th day of Hanukkah on the Zendok calendar. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
yep, yep. Okay, so let's see here, and just going back now, these months obviously carry into 2025
Yes.
for the year, and what we have as far as they don't have this listed on here, but Tu B'Shvat, the year of uh, the trees, New Year of Trees,
Yeah.
is on January 31st, I think it is. Let me jump back to my other calendar.
Yeah, because it's the 15th day of the 10th month. Yeah, 31 January. Yeah.
Yeah. So
On
31,
this
yeah.
calendar, on the Zendok calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where it would land for the Zadok calendar. And then on
Sure.
the Jews calendar, Tu B'Shvat is on the 13th of February. So
Yeah. Yeah.
again, there's that almost 2 weeks difference.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So,
Okay.
so what I found that interesting. Um, and as you know, the Zadok calendar basically bases it upon the sun, the movement of the sun, their calendar.
Yes.
And the other thing that intrigued me with respect to that is that, and I'm having trouble seeing it on this because it's actually because I've enlarged it. But let me just move this. Let me just
Yeah.
zoom out a second here.
In control minus will zoom out.
Oh, okay. I'll try that. It'll be quicker. No, it didn't work. Let me see here. Just use this.
No.
Okay. So then the other thing on the Zadok calendar is they have the Tukufa Tevet on the
Yeah.
17th of December. And of course,
Yeah.
as you know, they don't count that as a day because
Mhm.
that's the winter solstice.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. And then the next day is the winter day of remembrance.
All
So
right.
whether I slide this here a day and slide this over a day, I'm not sure. As far as the
Yeah. Yeah. No, you don't have to make the changes, but I follow you. You started,
yeah,
and it all works. It actually pans out that it's interesting that you got exactly 6 days. The seventh day, which is not counted, is basically there. So you've got a 6 day gap between the end of the 430 days. If you and your end of 430 days does not include the first day, the 7th of October,
okay,
that's fine. So
yeah,
yeah, look, I understand. I can see exactly, and this is, it's very interesting to see how that 6 days lines up exactly with Hanukkah on the Zendok calendar.
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what really intrigued me was the Tekufa, the winter solstice, and Christ coming out running his race. That scripture. Um,
Yeah.
and then I threw on top of that the full moon being on the 14th, 15th, and 16th. You've mentioned this a number of times that he what's the scripture about Christ coming or coming with a full moon?
Uh,
You know,
it's yeah, yeah.
bag of
It's
money or something. I forget what the scripture is.
yeah, it's in Proverbs, I think, if I recall it correctly. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, master of the house is away for on a long trip, and
A
he's
long
with a
trip.
bag of
That's the
money,
one.
and he
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
back
yeah,
at the full moon. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I just found that all very interesting, and it just seemed like it just fit perfectly. The 390 plus 40 ending on December 9th or 10th. You can call it into the end of the 9th, which begins on the 10th. If you want to say the escape happening then, and then the wedding, week there, and then at the end of the wedding week, which is Hanukkah. Obviously the light affliction occurring at that time, and then them seeing a great light, Christ returning for his 40 days at that point, starting at the winter day of remembrance after the Tekufa.
Mm.
Christ ready to run his race, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I was going with all that. And
Yeah.
when I was thinking about the 390 and 40, I said, that's 430 days. And I forget what the math was, but something came to mind with respect to Daniel 12, and that being very specific. Seems like that period of time is dealing with this period of time with respect to the temple. Oh, my
Yeah, so you're referring to the 2,300 days. So is that what
yeah,
you?
yeah. So
Uh,
the so I did a
yeah,
calculation to get the
that was yeah. You sent me a note and you said you felt pressed in the spirit to take the 390 and to multiply it by six, and you got
I
to
got
2,340
2,340 days.
days and 40 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
that was
and
interesting.
that you made that interesting. It was 2,300 days plus the extra 40,
Right.
which seems to be kind of related to the 2,300 days. Actually, Daniel 8. It's not Daniel 12. It's Daniel 8 where the
Right.
2,300 days is mentioned, and that's a very interesting connection because that Daniel 8 is a kickoff. It's the transgression of abomination, the transgression of desolation, not the abomination of desolation, but the transgression of desolation, which is a third one. There's two abomination of desolations, but there's a separate transgression of desolation that's mentioned in Daniel chapter 8. And it's all connected also to that whole story of the ram with the two horns. And the one horn is higher than the other horn, and the higher horn comes up last. And then you've got the goat with a prominent horn between his eyes, and he breaks the two horns of the ram, and the ram can do nothing about it. And connected to that whole story is this out of the prominent horn of the goat. I'm just giving a bit of background to that story. So before we go into it, so that prominent horn of the goat then is broken, and out of it comes four horns, and out of one of those four comes one that speaks greatly of itself, and you can see some clear connections there to some Antichrist type character who becomes very dominant, says a lot of things, and he brings about the end to the daily. Now, in the King James, it says daily sacrifice, but the sacrifice is actually in italics, so it's just the daily. He brings an end to the daily at the sanctuary of strength. So what is the sanctuary of strength and what is the daily? And he brings about an end to the daily. And then we are told later on that to understand that from the time of the ending of the daily to the cleansing of the sanctuary is 2,300 days. or sorry, let me be more specific. It's 2,300 evenings and mornings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where where your calculation of 6 times the 390 that you were led to do, and you made that connection. So when does if the 2000, now this, we would have to go into the story a little bit in Daniel 8, because there are different ways to understand that scripture.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is Daniel 8 talking about a time at the end entirely? So is the entire story going to play out again? We know that there's a connection to Daniel 8, the the ram with the two horns being connected to Persia and the Persia Mede Empire, and how they were taken out by Alexander the Great, who was the prominent horn. And we know that in history, Alexander the Great died, and then his kingdom was divided into four, and then and that's where we are at now. So we make that connection, and then all the rest of it hasn't happened yet, clearly. So the question is, where it says these things are, this vision is for the time of the end,
That's
is the
Daniel
entire
13.
vision, that's Daniel.
That's
Yeah, but in Daniel 8, it also speaks about this vision being for the time of the end. In Daniel 8, I think it's from 13 onwards that the story is. We'd have to go and see if we can find it. It was the explanation of it for the latter 23, 8:23, in the latter time of their kingdom. See, this is the this is talking about the four kingdoms that come out of the single horn. That when the transgressors are come to the full, that the king of fierce countenance and understanding dark tendencies will stand up, and 8:24, and his power shall be mighty, but not of his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice it shall destroy the mighty and the holy people, and through his policies that he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace he shall destroy many, and he shall stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken without hand. So it's all a lot of this is now all linked to the latter time of this kingdom. And then is the vision of the evening and the mornings. You see there it's referred to the evening and the mornings, because a little bit earlier on, I think it's 8:13, it talks about the 2,300 evenings and mornings. It says there, this is now after being given the vision of the ram being taken out by the single horned goat. An angel came to him, I think in verse maybe a little bit higher, 8:11 somewhere. Okay, he waxed great, and he waxed and then magnified himself, and then the host was given to him, and the daily by reason of transgression was, and he cast down the truth to the ground, and practiced and prospered. And then he heard the one saint speaking to the other saint unto that certain, let's just go up 8:13. This is the interesting one. 8:13. 8:13. I heard the one saint speak to the other saint, saying that certain saint shall speak. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily? I'm not reading the italic parts. And the transgression of desolation. You see, there is the transgression. This is not the abomination of desolation. This is a transgression of desolation. It's different to the abomination of desolation, okay? That was, the abominations are referred to in Daniel 11 and 12, or 10 and 12. I can't remember exactly. I think it's 10 and, it was 11. 11, definitely one of them is in 11, and the other one could well be in 12. Anyway, but those are abomination of desolation. This is a transgression of desolation. So from the transgression to,
yeah, that's important. That's an important distinction you're making right there too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So this is a transgression of desolation. So he spoke, and how long will be the vision concerning the daily? and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. So the sanctuary is a some it's not the temple, but it's something related to the temple, and it's trodden underfoot. And then he said unto me, unto 2,300 days. Now then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Can you just switch it through to the King James Plus? I just want to see that days. Is it actually, or I don't think that 2,300 is that word days? What is it? Actual days?
Day and evening, day and night.
Yeah, you see this. Yeah, it's translated. You see, it's misleading. You see, there's a reason why it actually should have been translated 2,300 evening mornings, right?
Yep, evening and
Because it spoke about evening mornings, the vision concerning the day. This evening mornings is important because I think it was later on we read that also that he says that the vision of the evening mornings is true. See, later on, I think we read it in 8. It was further down. It was 8. Just there's 2 places that refers to evening mornings. And the one place is translated evening mornings, and the other place is translated day.
and what's the significance of that difference?
Well, yeah, I don't know, but all I can tell you is what is the question is because I've had a suggestion, but somebody said evening mornings wouldn't be 2,300 days, but half of that would be evening and morning, and so they count an evening and a morning. So in other words, they would say that would be sorry, 1,150 days because they take 2,300 divided by 2 because they say evening and morning. So they're saying it's not
Not a full day,
2,300
it's a half a
days.
day.
It's half a day. But that that evening mornings, if you look at those 2 numbers, if you go to Genesis 1 and each of the day of creation, it says, and it uses the exact same words, evening mornings, to describe each day. If you just go look at the numbers,
Oh,
evening,
right here, yeah. Genesis 1,
yeah,
5.
same evening mornings. You can switch it evening, yeah.
Yeah,
What's that? 6153. and
6153. Yeah.
and 1242 6153 and 1242. If you go back to Daniel, I think you'll see it's exactly the same, 6153 and 1242.
Yeah, but it's combined in the same. It's not separated.
Yeah, no, but they've just combined they've taken 2 Hebrew words
Yeah,
and they've decided to call it days.
right.
Yeah, but it's the same words. It's the same Hebrew words, right? So in Genesis 1, it's considered to be a day. And here, I would say it's a day as well, just to get that out of the way, because
Okay.
we're talking the difference if the one instance is 6 years and 4 months, the other one would be 3 years and 2 months. And it's about a time when they will be trodden underfoot. Daniel 8:13, that the host will be trodden underfoot. The sanctuary and the host will be trodden underfoot for this period of time. Now, this trotting underfoot, is it for 6 years and 4 months, or is it for 3 years and 2 months?
Well, with that said, can we jump back to the Zendok calendar for a second?
Yeah.
All right, 1 second. Just pull that back. I'm going to jump to 2031, and all right, so we got 2,340 when we multiply 390 times 6, right? So I just want to do that again. 390 times 6, 2,340 days. And then if I went to the date calculator.
So, Bryan, I just want to be clear on that. There's no scriptural. This was a purely, my understanding is that this 390 times 6 was what you believe to be spirit-led. There's no scriptural reference for it. Is that correct? 390 times 6 there's no scriptural reference
No,
to
there isn't any scriptural.
It's just something.
No, there
Come
isn't.
to mind, and yeah, okay,
Not
with you, okay.
Mind, but what I did was on December 18th of 2024, I added 2,300 days. So if we went back to the calendar that I was showing you earlier, December 18th would be the very first day of the 40 days of the Son of Man. Okay, based on the previous end of the 390, and then that's the wedding week, and then December 18th.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
added 2,300 days, not 2,340. And when I went to the Essenes calendar for 2031, let me just see here. So here we are at AD 2031. This is 6 years later.
Yeah.
At the end of that brings us to April 6th, the fifth day of unleavened bread. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Well, look, it's we know that. Look, what does Daniel 8 says? It says at the end of that 2,300, let's call it days for now, evening, mornings. That will be the cleansing. There will be a cleansing of the sanctuary. Okay, so we know for certain. Daniel tells us there's a cleansing at the end of this period. When you mention it to me in your message, what did come to mind is that Jesus did do a cleansing of the temple in the middle of Passover. One of the Passovers, he goes into the temple and he throws over the tables and he starts cleaning out the temple, which is the sanctuary. So there is a connection there. I'm seeing a connection, and I do understand that. I'm just trying to understand that in terms of where we also think that it might be, in terms of the seals, and where we will be in terms of, is this in line with where we're expecting the rapture of the church to happen, which might be Passover or its second Passover.
Well, this would be the first Passover. This isn't the second Passover.
Yeah, this would be the first part, not second Passover. Yeah. But is this the start of the cleansing, and then the actual rapture occurs at the second Passover? That's all things to think about. It. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
I must concede.
in the 6 years that, the start of, the return, coming, Christ coming back, and Alan has always kind of taught us about, he comes back at the 6th year. So this is almost like I see heavenly Mount Zion coming at this point in time. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, it's 6.5 by this stage. Remember, 2,300 days is 6 years, 4 months. Approximately, depending on, of course, how lengthy your month, how long your months are. But
so if I divide
it's
230,
on any calendar, it'll be approximately.
Yeah. So if I did
6 years and
2,300 divided by, let's say, if I use the Essenes calendar, a number of days is 364. That's 6.31.
Yeah.
So
a third. That's 6 years, and a third of a year. Hey, not 3 months. It's a third of a year. What is a third of a year? It's 4 months.
3 months.
It's 6 years and 1/3 of a year, which will be 4 months. So it's 6 years and 4 months. So, yeah, it does tie in. I must concede that definitely there is something going on there.
And then
that means that remember the beginning of the 2,300 days, the kickoff event was that transgression of desolation relating to the ending of the daily. Remember, there's an ending of the daily. Now, what is that daily in these end times? There's no sacrifices, and there is no word sacrifice in the text of Daniel. So I think I'm fairly clear that I think that the daily is related to the daily prayers that are taking place at the Western Wall. I do believe so, and it does seem to be linked to the ending of that event. So that's a very strong possibility. Now, when does that end? Does that end on the first attack, or does it end a week after the first attack? Which kind of implies I think if you're taking it from the 18th of December, it will be a week after the first attack. Is that right? 18 December, I think. When do you say the first attack would be? On the 10th or the 11th of December?
Any day after the 10th.
After the escape of the bride.
December. Yeah.
Yeah. Any time in that period, and you taking, so if we, of course, so if you've taken from the 18th, but if you had taken, and we ended up in the 5th day of, was it the 5th day of Passover in 31? Was it the 5th day of Passover on the 3rd day of Passover? No, in 31. Just go to your Zendok calendar.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go back. So if I went back 7 days,
31.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, you said six. Where did it come to? Was it the 6th of April?
April 6th on the fifth day of,
That's the fifth day.
yeah,
Fifth day of unleavened bread.
yeah,
So if it happened on the 13th, 5 days earlier, if the actual transgression of desolation actually starts a bit earlier than the 18th of December, um,
bring
and
it,
it starts on the 13th of December, then it could well be linked to the beginning of Passover or even on Passover. If you take how many you take in Passover, there's 6 days. There's exactly 6 days there. Passover plus the 5 days. So what would happen if you actually put in your date instead of 18 December, you put 11 December,
okay, 1 second.
you would actually come to Passover, or 12 December. I think you would come to the 1st of April.
You want to put in the 11th? So that would bring you to March 30th. Well, that's a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah. So
a couple
yeah,
days
so it's
before.
12. So you actually want to put in 12. So the
Okay.
two, 3 finishes on I would imagine the 2,300 must be complete, and then the cleansing will start.
March 31st. Yeah, March 31st is the day before Passover begins.
I just want to go and have a look just out of interest. While I'll just do it in the background. I just want to see what date it'll be on the Hebrew calendar. 31.
You have that ability to go to 2031 on the Jewish calendar?
So there you actually start. So March 30th, eh? Is the 7th of Nisan, 6th. So that's why I said it's a week before there's Passover, 14th. So it's about 8 days before Passover on the Jews calendar in 2031. So if you take that's interesting. Hang on a second. You add just take your December 18. You took a December 18 plus 2,300 came to
April 6th.
April 6th, which is the 13th. So the 14th day of the first month would be the end of on the Jews calendar. You're on the Zendok. It's the fifth day. It's the fifth day of the
So
of the unleavened bread, and on the Jews calendar, it's exactly on Passover.
The preparation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Eh? Sorry.
Preparation day. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, preparation day preparation day. You can call it that. Yeah. Yeah. 14th.
Yeah.
So is that when the cleansing starts, or the cleansing of the sanctuary at the end of the 2,300 evenings and mornings, if it had to start on the 18th of December of 24, which is about a week after we expect the bride to be taken on the 10th of December,
And
10th or
then
11th
again,
of
as I
December. So,
mentioned, when I multiplied 390 times 6, we get 2,340, which is interesting. Because
yeah, then
that 40 is in there.
But if you add another 40, it'll take you to beyond. Well, let's add another 14. Let's see where it takes us.
Okay.
Maybe it takes us to second. It'll probably take us to second Passover. It may actually. I'm not sure. That'll take us beyond.
Go ahead. You play with your calendar. I'll
Okay, I've got it. No, let's go to. Sorry. Take on. What was it? We want to go 18, eh?
So it'll bring you to May 10th. If I add 2,340 days, it brings you to May 10th.
Okay. So let's see where that May, June, May 10.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not doing it from the 18th on that one. Hold on. I got to go back to my 18th starting date.
Yeah.
May 16th. Sorry about that. May 16th.
May 16, 23rd. 23rd day of the second month. No, of the IR is, that's yeah, second month. It goes Nisan and then IR, right? And then Sivan, yeah. 23rd day of the second month. That's from the 18th of December. And we said from the 18th of December on their calendar brings us to the 14th of Nisan, right? For 2300 brings us to 14, and 2340 brings us to the 23rd day of the second month.
One more down. Shavuot 2. Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry.
No, it'll be there's second Passover starts the 14th of the second month. So it's after, as well after. It's actually, yeah, it's just after. It'll be the equivalent of the 8th day.
May 16th, I have May 16th.
That's May 16th, which will be 23rd day of IR.
There it is. All right.
Which is the equivalent of 8th day, but of second Passover, not, yeah. So that will be the end of the 40 days. I don't know, I'm not sure where okay, that's 2,340 days. Yeah, I can't, I've got no script. We've got nothing really other than the 2,300 in Daniel 8. There's no real precedent to add another 40 days. I think it was maybe the Holy Spirit was just wanting to bring you to connection of the 2,300 days. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
because there's nothing. Yeah, because there's nothing scriptural to take the 390 and multiply it by 6 that I can think of. But it is interesting that the 2,300 days does relate to the very days that we're looking at. You want to sum it up there in terms of what we've got here is, which we're looking at Ezekiel's 390 and the 40, so 430 days. We're counting it from October 7th, including the 7th. From October 7th. If we are to include the 7th, then it takes us to the 9th of December, which will be the 9th of the 9th month on the Hebrew calendar, but it will be the 22nd day of the 9th month on the Zendok calendar. Okay. Just have a look on your calendar there while you got just to confirm. Yep, the 9th of December is the
9th on the Zendok calendar.
Yeah, 9 December 2024.
It's the 23rd.
23rd day of the 9th month. And we know that that's a day before. And does the Hanukkah, I see, doesn't the Hanukkah start, does the Hanukkah start on the 24th day or the 25th day? Or the
25th.
It's the evening of the 24th.
Right, and that 24th of Kislev is December 10th.
Yeah. So if you don't include the 7th of October, if that's not day one, as the Jews currently are counting right now in real life, they're counting it, I mean, they've included the 7th. If they weren't supposed to include that day, and was supposed to be the 8th of October is the first day of the count of the 340, then it'll take us to the 10th of December, which would be the 10th day of the 9th month on the Jews calendar, and it would be the 24th day of the 9th month on the Zendok calendar. So there's a connection to the Zendok, there's a connection to the Hanukkah, the feast, Festival of Lights. And on the Jews calendar, there is potentially, if there's a 4-month difference between the Jews calendar and where the Lord sees it, then we potentially could be looking at the 10th of December being actually the 9/10th of the 5th month, if there's a 4-month difference. And we know that the 9th, 10th of the 5th month is a very critical day in the Jews. As far as the Jews are concerned, in terms of their history, we're talking about Judah now, hey? Because remember, well, even in the house of Israel, I don't want to get into it, but I do believe that they worship the golden calf on that day as well, the 9th stroke 10th of the 5th month is probably the day that they worship the golden calf. There's enough empirical evidence to show that that's probably the day of the bad report. The 10 spies that went in to spy out the land and came back, they probably gave that bad report. It's most likely that occurred on that date as well. We know for certain when the first temple was destroyed on that date. We know for certain the second temple was destroyed on that date. And so it's a very important date for them. But we've now moved on from that. And it's just a question of, where is the true 9th day of the 5th month? Is it, if it's to happen now? And, how do we discount Ezekiel's 390 and 40 days? I mean, let's be honest, if December comes and goes, well, then obviously, then we've got no clear starting point for the 340 days. At the moment, I don't think anybody can argue that the 7th of October is a very clear starting point. I can't think of anything else in our current history that would give us a more clear point to kick off the start of the counting that 430 days.
Yeah, I mean, end of Sukkot, the great 8th day. I mean,
yeah. So it's very, I don't know what those days were on the Zendok calendar, just out of interest. What the 7th of October, what day was it on the Zendok calendar? 7 October 2023.
I do have that. 2023, right?
Is it? Yeah.
Hold on, let me share my
yeah, you can. I think, did I end the share? Yeah, I've ended the share.
And the other interesting thing is that October 7th on the Zendok calendar was the 4th day of Tabernacles. Okay. And then obviously the 5th day of Tabernacles.
So on the Jews' calendar, it was the 8th day of Tabernacles, and on the Zendok calendar was the 4th day of Tabernacles.
Correct. Yep. And that was the 18th day of Tishri on October 7th.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And on the Jews' calendar, it would have been the 23rd day of Tishri in that year. I just wanted to see if there was something interesting about that 7 October on the Zendok calendar. So they're very close to one another in terms of they're both in that vicinity of the Tabernacles event.
What's interesting what's interesting too is that October 7th on the Zendok calendar, October 7th on the Zendok calendar is the middle of Tabernacles. And there's, they're completing tabernacles. The Jews are completing tabernacles on that day. And then when you get to a year later, Hanukkah's off almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because of the lunar, they're following a lunar versus a solar count.
Yeah. You say that, there's a year later, there's 2 weeks difference between the Zendok calendar and the Jews.
Yeah.
It's because of that 354 versus the 364. It's 10-day difference.
Yeah.
You got a 10-day difference between the Zendok calendar and because they would have had a short year. Just trying to think, did they 23 to 24? No, they had a long year. Sorry, 23 was a long year. So we actually, it's the other way around. You guys are working on 364. They had a 384. There's 20-day difference. They had a long year. They had 23 going into 23, 24. It was a 13-month year for them. So going from tabernacles in 23 to tabernacles in 24 would have been 384 days. Because they had an extra month. But Zendok only had 364.
Correct.
So that would be 20 days difference. These calendars can really
they can be pretty crazy.
Pretty twisted up.
That's why I like just straight numbers, 390 plus 40, 2,300 days.
Yeah.
1290 days, 1335 days. If you can find the starting point, it doesn't really matter. If you can find a starting point on any one of the calendars, you can get to where you need to be.
Well, yeah. Well, we've got a starting point in terms of an event. Okay, that doesn't matter which calendar you're using. We've got an event of the 7th of October, which is a significant event related to what we're looking at. And I think that on any calendar, no matter what position you're taking, I think that's a fairly significant marker. And it's just interesting to see how it matches the calendars in terms of when you do the count from that marker.
Right, exactly. And that's all I've done, with
Yeah,
what I'm sharing my screen now. Do you see it?
yeah. I've got
Yeah.
it. I can see it. Yeah,
Yeah, and so when I started that count, the 430 days, and then I got to, well, whether the end of the ninth or the 10th, and then just plotted everything that, what we've learned for the last, or since Ministry Revealed started, and then put in those 50 days. And that was the other thing I learned, is that there's multiple 50 days, 50-day counts between feasts, whether it's
yeah.
oil, whether it's new wine.
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
there's
No,
many,
there's no.
there's more than 150 that you can consider, but this one seemed to really fit well, especially when you get to Tu B'Shvat, and that being on the Zadok calendar, which would land on January 31st, at the end of those 50
Yeah,
days, and that's the end of the 70 years, right?
yeah,
If that's the ending point, but so it just seems to fit in there like a glove.
yeah. Got it.
You
It's very interesting. I think we'll be watching this very
Yeah,
closely.
yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so
can
just
you
to,
imagine? Can you imagine the Son of Man being here for Hanukkah in Judah, and being here at the same time as the presidential inauguration? Um, and of course, then you've got Christmas as well.
yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen to the House of Israel come December 11th. If the House of Israel is going to see, the Western nations are going to see destruction or what, I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
that's hard to say. I mean, it's certainly, being in the States, I'm certainly watching things transpire between Ukraine and Russia, and Russia's, I don't know how many more warnings they can send us, to Western Europe and the United States, that, you're crossing too many lines here. So,
yeah.
so it's
Just
something.
in terms of just in terms of a trigger, I just want to, I'm very clear. I always go back to Daniel's 70 weeks. I believe Daniel's 70 weeks is singularly the most important prophecy which concerns the coming of Christ. Because and I'm not going to go into it now, but the 309 the 70 weeks in terms of years, the 490 years on the biblical chronology showed exactly where Jesus, it worked out to exactly the 483rd year was exactly where Jesus was baptized, from when Daniel was told that the trigger for the 490 years, the trigger for Daniel's 490 years was the decree to restore and build Jerusalem. And we know that that was Cyrus's decree. Nobody else's. The other decrees were just confirmations, but the actual decree was Cyrus's decree in his first year, no question about it. And we know exactly when that was. That was in the 70th year of Daniel's captivity.
Hmm.
So we can calculate exactly where the 480th year was, and we know that was unto Messiah. And then the final 7 years was his ministry, of which he was cut off in the middle of that final week. Exactly 3.5 years he was cut off. And all of that worked out precisely in terms of Daniel's 70 weeks as it happened in the wars. But when you read it in terms of Daniel's 70 weeks, the Shabuah, which is a Feast of Weeks, which is 70 years, when you read that same prophecy in terms of years, the trigger is still the same. In other words, you're reading the same prophecy, and the trigger for the end time. Remember, we were told that it'll be 7 weeks, and then 6 weeks and 2. That's how the breakup was given in the first time around. And the first time it was 7 times 7 years, 449 years, plus another 6 and 2s, or 62 times 7, which was the remainder of that period, and leaving 1 right at the end, right? But in the end times understanding in years, it's 7 and 6 and 2. Now we know that the 7 is related to seals, the 6 is related to trumpets, and the 2 is related to the final 2 years to wrap up. Okay, so but the trigger is still the same. The trigger is the decree to restore and build Jerusalem. So that means that the 7, 6, and 2, which adds up to 15 years, Daniel was talking about, he wasn't just looking at the 14 years, he was talking about the full 15-year picture. The picture, so, we've got a 21/22-year picture, which includes the final year of Jubilee. But we've also got a 14/15-year picture, which includes the final year Jubilee in the 15-year picture. Daniel's prophecy is looking at the 15-year picture, and its breakup of 4, 6, and 2. So, 7, 6, and 2. So 7 and 6 is 13 plus 2 is 15. So Daniel's picture is 15 years. And what's the trigger for the 7, 6, and 2? The same as it was the first time, the decree to restore Jerusalem. That means that, in my understanding, the 14-year tribulation cannot start until the decree to restore Jerusalem happens, which means the only way there can be a decree to restore Jerusalem before the 14 years is that something must happen to Jerusalem, something really bad enough for them to then issue a decree to restore and build. Right?
Exactly.
And it's before the 14 years, because it's the trigger. Now we know the final attack is the beginning, so therefore the trigger must happen. Either it's the final attack, but I do believe that's a little bit earlier. It's the beginning of the 50 days. It's the first thing that happens, the first attack. The first attack that happened, the minor attack, must include some serious damage to Jerusalem, so that there's now a decree during that 50 days to restore Jerusalem, and that's the trigger then for the 14/15 years of Daniel. And that decree also goes hand in hand with that time of peace and security. When they say peace and security, then sudden destruction comes. I truly believe that time of peace and security is that in that 50 days. In that, after something really bad happens to Jerusalem, the decree to restore and build, and the peace and security, talking of peace and security, probably also coming to some sort of agreement to split Israel up, and all those things all happens in this 40 days. In the same time that you just said, all these things are happening. Christmas is happening, Hanukkah is happening, New Year's is happening, during this 40 years, and we've probably also got this time of peace and security happening, and probably also them subdividing the land into 2. Probably all of this happening in that same time period. Can you imagine? It's going to be a pretty hectic time in that time period. That's the way I currently see it, and so I'm looking at, is something really bad happening to Jerusalem anytime between, so let's say 9, 10 of December and the 18th December. In that time period, something really bad happened to Jerusalem, which will cause them which will be part of that first attack. I know the understanding is that it's Tel Aviv and Haifa, and I'm not saying Tel Aviv and Haifa won't be included. They probably will be. They are targets. Somehow Jerusalem has to be included. Otherwise, Daniel can never have a trigger.
Right.
Daniel 70 can't have a trigger.
Yeah.
And Daniel needs a trigger. And that trigger is the command or the decree to restore and build Jerusalem. Not to restore and build Tel Aviv or to restore and build Haifa, but specifically to restore and build Jerusalem. So something must happen for them to make the decree. I can't see it any other way. And then you've got, on top of it, you've got this transgression of desolation. What is that transgression of that? It's something bad enough to end the daily. So is that the thing that happens to Jerusalem? That really bad thing, that transgression of desolation that ends the daily, that triggers the count of the 2,300 days. So these things are all coming together, the transgression of desolation, the trigger for Daniel, and the first attack could well be all the same event, and the escape could all be the same event. And if it's the end of the 430 days of Ezekiel, it ties in Ezekiel's prophecy, it ties in Daniel's prophecy, it ties in uh, uh, um, the understanding of potentially the understanding of the ninth day of the fifth month, if indeed the Lord sees the ninth month as the fifth month because of that 4 month difference. And so maybe we must just have a look at that 4 month difference that as potentially, I believe I believe the ninth day of the ninth month is actually the ninth day of the fifth month in the Lord's eyes.
Oh, that
4 months difference.
Yeah, that brings up another thing. When Alan was doing one of his, I think it was teaching 2 weeks ago or so, he talked about the flip. These months flipping. I don't know if you caught that or not.
Yeah, it's a mirror image. I do understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, instead of the year starting in Nisan, the year starts in Tishris, but you've got the same counts happening. So,
Right.
Tishri is now seen as month one. So, yes, month 7 is month 1, month 8 is month 2, month 9 is month 3,
And that was another thing that I had brought up is like, when the flood happened, did things get completely flipped? Did seasons get flipped? Did times get flipped? Did, was that, was the full moon, the dark moon, vice versa, did everything get turned upside down? And that's kind of maybe one of the missing links was that a dividing line? And why there's maybe been some confusion between the Jews counting starting their month on a dark moon versus a full moon, and vice versa. Well, whatever it was at one time, I don't know. Just something I had thought of.
Yeah, this is yeah. Look, it's possible. I don't personally believe in a flip having occurred. I can't. That's a theory, but what I can show, that is factual, is that there is a progression of the equinox, and the equinox is tied into the season. So in other words, the spring is tied into equinox when the sun is over the equator, and so there's a very clear. In other words, if the equinox is shifting, then the seasons are shifting. Now, let's just get it clear. The sun and the moon are still rotating at exactly the same speeds, I do believe, as they originally were. But the ecliptic, the point at which the sun crosses over the equator, which then forms the equinox, that point in time is shifting through the constellations. So we're saying that in Abraham's time, that point in time where the spring, in other words, where the sun was crossing the equator and it's now springtime, that occurred when the sun was in Taurus. But the interesting thing is, if you go further back into creation, of course, then it goes into then that springtime would have actually occurred in Cancer. Before, because it goes Taurus, then Cancer, and then Leo, right? If I recall correctly. So, and we know that it's a constellation change every 2,166 years.
Mm.
Now, in the last video that Alan did, I understand exactly what he was doing. He was saying, well, in the beginning, Taurus was in, or the beginning was in Tishri, the 7th month, and now it's actually moved to where it is now. And God had to make a shift. He had to make adjustment, because obviously what happened was the seasons moving, but the beginning of the year was standing still, according to the constellations, but the seasons were moving on. So you had some difficulty with celebrating the feasts that are linked to a harvest, and the harvest is moving because the seasons are shifting. So he had to make an adjustment to cater for it. And what exactly the size of the adjustment was at the time, it was probably a relatively small adjustment. I mean, one can go into Stellarium and see exactly where the beginning of the difference between where the beginning of the year was. If it was shifted to Taurus, I think it was maybe just 2 constellations or so that he shifted it, possibly, but not 6. It wasn't this jump of 6 months. It would be impossible to have a jump of 6 months to Taurus at that time. And that's why I don't agree with that notion that the Lord moved the beginning of the year from what we now call the 7th month, and he moved the 6 months to what we now call the Nisan. That's 6 constellations. And we have 1 constellation only every 2,000 years. So that's 12,000 years. We know that even in the greater understanding of the creation, the sun and the moon weren't created 12,000 years ago. They were created 8,000, not even, no, it's 3,500 plus 6,000. They were created about 9,500 years ago. Let me explain what I'm saying. We know that Adam came in the 3rd set of 7,000 years, right? But the creation was in the middle set of 7,000 years, right? So before Adam, there was a creation, and it spanned over a period of 7,000 years. And in that, the sun and the moon were created on the 4th day. So sometime in between after 3,000 years, but before 4,000 years were up, in the 4th day, the sun was created. So somewhere between, well, let me put it this way: it's somewhere between 4,000 and between 3,500 and 4,000 years before Adam, the sun and the moon were created. So you can't get a progression of the equinox before they were created. So you got to take that. Let's make it 4,000 years before Adam. The sun was created, sun and moon were created. And let's say the progression actually started moving already 4,000 years before Adam. And Adam was how long ago? 6,000 years. So it's 10,000 years is the maximum. So you can take 10,000 years and divide it by 2,166, and you will get to less than 5. You'll get to 4.6 if I recall correctly. So it's impossible to get a 6-month progression in the time since the sun and the moon were created. I believe that the sun and moon creation thing was probably more like 3,500 plus the last 6,000, so it's 9,500. If you take 9,500 divided by 2,166, you get 4.4 constellations. So the Lord has had to make, so since the sun and the moon were created, we've had no more than 4 and a bit of movement of, that's 4 and a bit constellations of movement, of which we've seen 2. They've moved since Abraham's time. It's moved from Taurus through Aries, and it's now sitting in Pisces. So that's 2 months. And if the maximum movement can be 4, that means it was from creation it moved 2 months up to Abraham, and then another 2 months from Abraham till now. That's a total of 4 months. So the beginning of the year was not when the sun was in Taurus. The beginning of the year was when the sun was in Leo. It's just it's just impossible to move, the beginning, because the season, you've got to go by the season. The season. Okay, let me rephrase that. The year could have started in Taurus all along, but the season, spring season, in Abraham's time, the spring was in Taurus, right? But in beginning of creation, it was 2 months earlier. That means spring was when the sun was in Leo. The spring was there. Where the year actually started, if the year started when the sun was in Taurus, that means it was spring for 2 months, and then the year started in the middle of summer. I don't know if I've lost you guys on that one, but you just go look at the movement. If the year starts in Taurus and the spring was 2 months, was at the equinox, the equinox would have been in Leo in the constellation Leo at the time of it was created, and then By the time of Adam, it had moved to the point. Sorry, by the time of Abraham, it had moved to the time to where Taurus was now. The spring was in Taurus, and now spring is in Pisces. So in that time, if the beginning of the year was always supposed to be when the sun was in Taurus, that means there were 2 months before the beginning of the year. Spring came 2 months before the beginning of the year, and now it comes. Spring comes. Uh, uh, 4 months, well, 2 months before, when the sun's in Taurus, and it comes 2 months before. So the spring comes 2 months before Taurus, and originally it was it was it was it would have been the spring would have been in when the sun was in Leo.
Mhm.
One would have to, I'm just spitballing here now because one would have to do this diagrammatically to really to explain it properly. But I think if you just bear in mind there cannot be a 6 month change. There can only be a maximum of about 4.5 constellations since the sun and the moon were created.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line. And when I look at that and I say, okay, well, fine. So maybe there's a 4 month adjustment. And Jesus said, you say the harvest is in 4 months. But look, the field is white and ready for harvest now. So he's made a 4 month. And is it 4 months to Feast of Weeks? Or is it 4 months to when they started the harvest? When would they have started the harvest in the year? When in any year, when did they start the harvest? Just after Passover.
Huh?
They would start the harvest just after barley is the first that gets harvested.
Right.
And that's just after unleavened bread, they would start harvesting the barley. So when does the harvest start? Just after Passover. So when Jesus was saying, you say the harvest is in 4 months, was he saying the harvest of the wheat, which is clearly in the middle of summer? Or was he saying the harvest, as in the harvest period, when you start harvesting? Your harvest year starts when? Just after Passover. So it's all a case of how do you go backwards 4 months from Passover, or do you go backwards 4 months from the middle of summer?
Mm.
I believe we must go 4 months from Passover, which will put us in the ninth month. Because if you take the middle of the ninth month to the middle of the 10th, that's 1 month. To the middle of the 11th, that's 2 months. To the middle of the 12th, that's 3 months. To the middle of the 1st is 4 months. And that's what's the middle of the 1st? It's the end of Passover, the beginning of the harvest. So the middle of the ninth month is clearly 4 months before the harvest. And that's why I say, and what is the 10th of December? That whole week that we're looking at, that's 6 days, and we're looking at the escape of the bride, and then the 40 days starting right in the middle of the ninth month. So that's where and when we go look at the text, if we go look in the text in John 4, and you try and understand when that timing was, you can just bring up the John 4 on, I don't know if you've got, just go to Eastward. We
Yep.
can have a look at trying to understand when did Jesus say, when did he make that statement
Well,
in John 4? When was
yeah,
it?
that was one of the discussion threads that I had posted not too long ago on Ministry Revealed. Is what time of year was it that that statement was made? And so, where do you want me to go on Eastward?
John 4.
John 4.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so John 4, and he says, okay, this is the whole story of where he meets the Samaritan woman at the well, and it's clearly a story related to the Gentile bride, house of Israel, the house of Israel. That's what this whole story is all about.
Mm-hmm. And let's see,
And Jesus says,
I think that's down before there. Let's see here. Was it John 4?
it's a little bit higher up. Um, A little bit higher. 30. It's about 30. Hang on. No, too far. Sorry.
Here it is, John
Yeah,
4:35.
35. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So so it's it's after he had spoken to her, and then he interjects with this lot. That say you not that there are 4 months, and then cometh harvest, right? He doesn't say harvesting of what, but it's a time of harvesting. We know that the time of harvesting starts just after unleavened bread with barley. So he says, you say it's in 4 months, but I say, behold, look, and I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white, ready for harvest right now, 4 months earlier. And then he goes on to the wages for the reapers and all that kind. It's clearly talking about the worker group, and there's some links there to the worker group.
So, so
And
if we went 4 months earlier than, let's say, the first harvest of the barley, for instance,
yeah,
bring us to November, December area,
yeah,
right? Okay, so
yeah,
the commentation, I read a commentator say something to the effect that this is, after, and I had mentioned this earlier when we were speaking, that when Jesus had met the woman at the well, and told her about who she was and her husbands and all that, and she realized he was the Christ, she went into town, she told everybody, and they all started to come back out of the town towards Jesus and his disciples. He was saying, lift up your eyes and look at the people coming towards us right now. This is the harvest. It's a harvest of souls, not a harvest of grain or wheat or corn. And
sure,
that's just one opinion. That's one commentary. And what's interesting about that is that November, December is this period of time where we find the Feast of Dedication and Hanukkah, and it's related in John. Let me just pull up my notes here. In John 10:22, and it said, "I and the Father is one," and that's the title to the chapter. And it says, and it was at Jerusalem the feast of the dedication, which we know as Hanukkah, and it was winter. It says that specifically, and it was winter. So this is right when the Tekufas occurred, the winter solstices occurred. And the next sentence is, "And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's
yeah.
porch." So I'm wondering if this is all at the same period of time within, a few days of each other.
Well, all we've got here is John 5. You've got verse 1. Just go to John 5. Just jump to John chapter 5. Yeah. And then and then we are told that after this was the feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So now the big debate is, what is this feast that John was referring to in John 5:1? What feast was it?
Well, this is the other direction in which I've heard people, and someone in the forum made this comment that the only feast of the Jews is Hanukkah, because that's the only one that was developed because of the Maccabees.
Yeah.
And I've heard the argument that we've been saying it's the feast of the Jews because the Jews are celebrating on the wrong day, and then there's been that comment made, and I've gone,
Well, no, yeah, that was John 7. I know when you go the John 7, it talks about the Feast of the Jews tabernacles. Just go read John 7. It's similar, but it actually it's the Jews feast. It says, I think it says the Jews feast of tabernacles. Just go back to it's not quite the same.
that could have been the Feast of Tabernacles, then it could have been booths.
Yeah, so just picking up from that point, the difference between John 7 and John 5. If you just go to John 7. I think it's towards the end of John 7. Yeah, it's still, sorry, it's probably John 7, right in verse 1. I thought it was the end of John 7, but it's right in the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
John 7, yeah, and now the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. See, the other one says, now came the Feast of the Jews, and we don't know what it is. And this one is now the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. So we know it's Tabernacles, but And we
So,
argued that does it say the Jews feast of tabernacles because of they were celebrating it at the wrong time, or in these end times it's trying to indicate to us that it's the Jews feast of tabernacles, but it's not necessarily the Lord's feast of tabernacles. But we know for certain in John 7, which is related to the 7th year, going into the 8th year, we know it's at the time of tabernacles. Okay. But when we go to John 5, now we've got a feast there. It's the Jews' feast. And this is the debate. You can go back to John 5:1. What feast was it? I've had people arguing that it was Passover. Some people count that feast as Passover. I've argued that there was tabernacles, but looking at it more recently again, I do believe it actually might well be the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. It may well be.
Yeah,
because
an entire year passes between John 5 and John 7.
yeah, almost, yeah. Because there's a Passover in between. You see, I did a study on this whole thing. Maybe I'll just, if I can get the screen share back, I'll bring it up and I'll show you. The book of John is our only gospel that gives us some semblance of a chronology for Jesus' ministry. The other gospels, there's no way that you can derive a sense of, a timing sense from them. It's just impossible. Luke gives a little bit in the beginning, and there's a little bit in Luke, but the main one in terms of understanding the sequence of events for Jesus' ministry is in John. And John seems to always jump from he jumps from a Passover. You can see there's a Feast of Weeks type of thing. There's tabernacles, Passover, tabernacles, Passover, tabernacles, Passover, tabernacles, throughout his book, throughout the book of John, except for this one, where it's called the Feast of the Jews. And so this was a study that I did. I don't know if you can. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Let me just share screen first. Okay. This was a study on John, and then I did, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can see here that it starts where we get the beginning bit from Luke. Okay, we get that the first Passover and that Jesus's baptism, which was at the time just after his birthday, so it would have been the third or somewhere between the third or the fifth month that he was baptized. His birthday would have been the third month, but his baptism would have been after his birthday. So somewhere, and we get that from Luke. And then John's first mention of anything, let me just see, was a Passover. So John, in John 1, there's nothing, he talks about the baptism. Sorry, this is the other thing, of course. Sorry, I just need to highlight this. John actually never talks about the baptism. He makes this reference, and everybody associates John 1:5, where he says, "Behold, look, the Lamb of God." Hey, in John 1:29-34, he says, "Look, behold, the Lamb of God." And most people make that as a connection to the time when he was baptized. But it was impossible. Because I'll tell you why it's impossible. Because the only way John knew that Jesus was the Lamb of God was after he saw the Holy Spirit descend on him. And he only saw the Holy Spirit descend on him after the baptism. So there's no way that he could have made this statement, "Behold, look, the Lamb of God," until it was a time after the baptism. So John doesn't start off at the baptism. He starts off at some time after the baptism. And my argument was, I think it's a year after the baptism, but that's for another day. Okay, so we can get into that another day. But the point I'm trying to make is, we see that in John, he sees this, and then you have this wedding in Canaan on the third day. He says, "Behold the Lamb of," and then it talks about the first day and the second day, or the next. It says again the next day, and then the day following, and then it's the third day was the wedding in Cana, and then it's a few weeks or a few days before Passover. This John 2, this wedding is just before Passover, and then we've got this actual Passover happening here. He attends the Passover in John 2. So now we've got the first Passover happening.
This is
Then a
where
whole lot of events.
is this where he does the first
Sorry?
miracle of turning the water into wine?
At the wedding, he turns the water into wine at the wedding, but it would have been
Okay.
before this Passover, sometime before. I don't think it was too many days. It says not many days.
And you're sure it's
And
just before Passover at that Cana wedding was occurring around
yeah,
Passover?
yeah, because it says in John 2 in 2:12-13 it says that the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. So
Okay.
after the Cana wedding, it says the Jews' Passover was at hand. And then just after that, in John 2:16, then there was Passover, and he performed many miracles there. Okay. Then we have the story of I must increase and he must decrease, that John says to him. And then we have the story of the Samaritan woman, which is the one we've been talking about right now. So this whole I must increase and you must decrease happens in John 3:22-36. And then just after that, he goes to Galilee, and we've got this the woman the Samaritan woman in Samaria, the woman at the well, and then he makes the statement. So at the time of the statement, we know it's between Passover and this feast of the Jews. Okay, it's between Passover and whatever this feast of the Jews is. That's all we know. That's all we know. It was nowhere near the next. It wasn't just before Passover. It was after Passover, but before this feast of the Jews. That's categorically we can.
That could very well be Hanukkah. That could very well be the
It could well be.
dedication.
Yeah, sure. That's exactly. I had it. I said I had this. You can see in my study. I said this is probably tabernacles
Well,
because John
yeah,
had
I
the
mean, it's
habit.
close enough. It certainly is close enough to
It's
tabernacles.
it's close enough, but I do believe it is possible that it actually was more the feast of dedication or Hanukkah. That this feast actually happened. But we do know. I think there's a connection between those. It's definitely.
Yeah.
So the question is, was it after Tabernacles or was it between Tabernacles? In other words, where I've got Tabernacles, yeah, was Tabernacles actually probably, I don't know, somewhere before this 4 months thing.
So 4 months.
If this 4 months thing, was at the it was just before Hanukkah, then it puts this 4 months event somewhere between Tabernacles. And that means that this tabernacles, yeah, must actually happen somewhere between after I must increase and he must decrease, and Jesus goes to Galilee, somewhere there.
Yeah, he must. Yeah, I mean, and that clue there, where he must increase, but I must decrease, is that could be the winter solstice right there.
Yeah, which
Right?
means well, yeah, it could be. So that means the tabernacles must happen there. After that, tabernacles is after that solstice. So
Well, no,
after this,
well,
after this, the summer solstice, you have
no, not
tabernacles.
summer. I'm talking the winter solstice.
Yeah, your sorry, yeah, your winter solstice, our summer solstice in the southern
Right,
hemisphere.
right. We gotta I keep forgetting
Yeah,
about that. You're way down the
yeah,
other end of the plane.
yeah. But Jerusalem, certainly. Well, speaking from a Jerusalem perspective, it would be
Yeah.
it would be the winter solstice. Yeah, yeah. So that means where I had tabernacles there, tabernacles probably must be there, and maybe this is Hanukkah.
Yeah.
It could well be.
And
John
if you
5:1
think,
is
and if you think about 4 months to the harvest, and we're talking from Hanukkah, then we're talking about the barley. We're talking about the overcomers at that point, which is interesting because at the end of that 6 years, where we calculated the 2,300 days, that brings you to Passover. And that brings you to about where the barley harvest would be,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Hmm.
Yeah. So, and then John's story carries on. I mean, you've got events that happened. And then we've got the next Passover that happened. In John 6, 1 to 4, there's clearly he went into the mountains of Sea of Galilee, and that was shortly before this Passover. In John 6, there's the miracle of feeding the great multitude. Jesus walks on water. We got the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost time again, and then we got Tabernacles again.
That's a
The
great
feast Jews of
spreadsheet.
Tabernacles.
That's a great spreadsheet, by the way. I love that. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the one we looked at in John 7, chapter 1, the Jews Feast of Tabernacles. And then there's a whole lot of things that happen. And then there's a clear mention of the Feast of Dedication, which, as you say, was in winter. That's the one you referred to in John 10.
And
So
it was
these two
winter.
could well
And
be,
you even got
yeah,
it in there. It was winter. Yeah.
yeah. I've got it. Yeah, that's we
So,
picked up in John 10. Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's
that
almost
means,
like they're saying it was the start of winter. You know, it was when, I mean, he's making a declaration that, you know, that's an
yeah,
important statement right there.
yeah, no, sure. There's a clear link there, very clear.
Yeah.
And look at what Jesus is teaching at this time. He's teaching the sheep will hear my voice. And then he returns to a place where in Jordan, where in John 10:40, he goes back to where John was doing, where he was baptizing, a place in Jordan. But so this is a year on. If this is indeed the Feast of Dedication, this 4 months thing, this I'm going to actually let me just highlight that. I'm just going to make it. I'm just going to make it orange. If this is all related, this Feast of the Jews and the 4 months thing is all related, that would be a year before this one. Exactly a year, because that's a year of events. There's winter things, Passover, Tabernacles, and then the next Feast of Dedication. And he speaks about, sheep hearing his voice, etc., etc. This is also shortly after that, Lazarus dies, and he's raised again, and then we have the final Passover. After Lazarus was raised from the dead, you have the final Passover in John 11, and then that's it. Passover to Tabernacles, and then you've got these winter months mentioned. He clearly mentions winter here. Yeah, we've got white, the fields are white, was it also related to winter? I know what you're saying in terms of the connection to the people, and he's referring to the people being white and ready. But I think there's also somehow a connection to, I mean, there must have been something that was white. You said, look at the fields are white. So was it, I know somebody's may said, oh, okay, the people were white, but I don't know. I'd take the simple approach. I think there was snow all over the place. I think the fields were white and snow.
I mean, it was winter. It could have very well been white.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a number of things. It could have been.
It could have been a number of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got a winter connection. Jesus also said, pray that your flight is not in winter, eh? Is it in Mark or Matthew that he says, pray that your flight, referring to?
It's in both, and there's a distinction between Mark and Matthew with respect to the flight. One talks about affliction in Mark, and then when it's referring in Matthew, it's talking about great tribulation. So
yeah,
so
but both of them have a winter connection. Both of them have a winter.
And the other difference in Matthew is pray that your flight not be in winter or on the Sabbath. That's in Matthew, but there's no mention of Sabbath in Mark.
Luke has got neither.
And yeah, Luke has nothing. There's no.
That because it's before winter.
Well, no, there's no. I think the Luke. Well, isn't it because Luke's above, and there is no reason for Luke to flee anywhere? Luke,
yeah,
because he's removed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but is the removal before winter?
I would think so.
I think there is something in that.
Yeah, I would think so.
Anyway, that's so that kind of puts a timing to that whole 4 months thing, and that's why I made the connection. I said, okay, well, if on the Jews calendar we're looking at the middle of December being the true ninth month, on the Jews calendar being the ninth month of the Jew calendar, and we've got this 4 months difference, I said to myself, well, if is it because the Lord sees the ninth month of the Jews actually as being before where the Jews would start their harvest? I mean, practically speaking, their harvest is pegged by the seasons. It's not pegged by any calendar. We know that come March, beginning of April, they will start harvesting barley, regardless of which calendar you're looking at. They're going to start their harvest. So take 4 months before that, and regardless of what calendar you're looking at, we're looking at about this time. All we're trying to do is tie in the events of the ninth of the fifth month, the ninth of Av, the disastrous day for the Jews, and the day that the Lord has used over and over and over and over again to bring about judgment on the house of Judah. How is it possible that he will bring about another final judgment on the house of Judah on a different date other than the ninth of the fifth month or the ninth of Av?
Mm.
Or is it that he's going to bring it about on the very day that actually is the ninth of Av? That's my argument.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course, Alan is arguing the same point. He's just saying, look, the start of the count is the beginning of the seventh month, is the beginning of the year, and you count where would the ninth of Av would be in the middle of February, and which ties into the festival of trees on the Jews calendar. So the argument is exactly the same. It's just a case of there's a 2 months difference between where we consider the true ninth of the fifth month could be. I'm saying it potentially could be the middle of December. Of course, Alan is saying 2 months later, the middle of February. But both of them are looking at the Lord starting his judgment against Judah in the early week, in the beginning or the first half of the fifth month, first half of the true fifth month, where Alan is saying, okay, in terms of the mirror image understanding, that would be middle of February. And I'm saying, well, in terms of the 4 months difference understanding, that would be the middle of December. That's where we are at.
Yeah, yeah. It might be splitting hairs at that point, but
well, it's a 2 months. It's 2 months difference.
yeah, I guess that's not splitting hairs. That's a big window.
Yeah,
That's a big window.
yeah.
I still believe, and for some reason I don't know why I think because of Alan's understanding, he's kind of written off the 390, the 430-day count, is saying it doesn't apply anymore, and I don't, I still think it's
Yeah. Yeah, my view is this. I haven't actually heard Alan say that but I understand what you're saying. He doesn't seem to be regarding it as anything significant in these last days. I've taken a different view on the matter. When I read Ezekiel, it's got watchmen screaming all over it. It's like, I consider it to be the book written for the watchman. So if you consider yourself to be a watchman, Ezekiel is the book that you should understand. And it's got watchmen screaming all over from the beginning to the end, what you should be doing, and it's got the timings in it. It's even got like we're talking Ezekiel 39 war, and what's going to happen in that time. It's got the building of the temple. It's got, in Ezekiel 40 onwards, it's got everything in it, and it gives a great amount of detail in terms of what's going to happen when at that first attack. We know that a third is going to, he's got a cut of his hair, and a third of it is burnt, a third of it is cut up, and a third of it is scattered. So it's speaking about a third of the population is burnt, and I'm not talking burnt in the flames, but it's destroyed by a disaster, whereas a third is destroyed by the sword, which is firearms and that type of thing. It's a little bit different. So like pestilence and starving to death would be burning. Being shot would be by the sword. And then the last third is scattered through all the nations.
Right.
And we know so, and where do we get that picture from? It's all in the Ezekiel's 30, in his enactment that he had to do, where he had to cut. And there's interesting part is there's a small part that he had to take off his hair and put it in his clothing, hide it in his clothing.
Hmm.
So what part of the hair is that? So that's a part of Judah. That's a special little part that's going to be hidden away. Who's that?
This is going to be probably the 144,000.
Yeah, probably. But what I'm saying is Ezekiel is giving the watchman a great amount of information. Why on earth would we disregard the 390 and the 40
Yeah.
days if my understanding is correct and Ezekiel is for the watchman?
Yeah.
Why would you ignore the 390 and the 40 days, which is the big portion of Ezekiel?
The other reason I'm partial to Hanukkah being the time and and the bookend of the Tu B'Shvat with the feast time of new trees is because I had a vision in the 90s, the mid 90s. The Lord gave me. It's the only vision I've ever had. It was an open day vision where I don't know if you ever read my account of that on Ministry Revealed.
I think I have, Brian, but I really can't remember the detail
So,
right
so
now.
what happened was is I was studying the book of Revelation, and I was living in a small apartment in a city in Massachusetts. And anyways, I was sitting there just, I don't know if I was just contemplating something I had just read or something, but I had like another set of eyes open, and I saw a bush and a tree next to each other, and everything was white, like the landscape was white. It was very stark. The background was stark. And I had this tree and this bush, and which I later found out after it was confirmed to me with the burning bush, they are filled with light. They were filled with light. And so come full circle, I'm looking at there's been things that have been revealed to me since October of 30, October 31st back in 2021, when I realized I actually saw the tree in the bush that I saw in the vision. And there's been things that have been coming to light over time about what that vision means, and especially with Ministry Revealed and the things I've learned. But it wasn't until just like a few days ago that I said that's representing the fact that the tree and the bush were filled with light, brilliant light, made me think of Hanukkah. And then Feast of Trees, it's almost like a bookend in one picture, it's almost like a confirmation. So I'm very hopeful that this is the time, based on that one vision that I received, geez, almost 30 years ago now.
Those are personal confirmations that we that influence our thinking and our understanding of many things. And I can share this a similar thing. And your vision and your understanding ties into the current dates that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Um, and
And the other thing I
yeah,
want,
so
just before you go,
um,
when
yeah,
when the tree in the bush, the actual tree in the bush that I saw in the vision was revealed to me, it was kind of an interesting way it came about. But it was October 31st, 2021. And
yeah,
October 31st, if we did the 390 count, was at the end of the 390,
yeah,
this year.
exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a dividing line. And so that was another
yeah,
thing that just like that the actual tree and bush that I actually saw in my vision was revealed to me on October 31st, 2021. So that was another thing
yeah,
that just kind of blew me away.
yeah. That was exactly on the 390. That's exactly right. I'll share with you. I have shared it on the forum before. There's two things there's a few visions that I've had, but there's one that really stands out that I have shared on the forum as well. It happened in the 2020. It was in that year of the lockdown. It was during the Tabernacles. It was in fact the first night of Tabernacles. Chantel, my wife, felt that we should, and we don't normally observe the actual feast days. We don't normally make a tabernacle. We don't make a what are they?
Six foot.
sorry,
Yeah.
a booth or anything like that, typically. But she said, oh, we wanted to camp out that night. So my son pitched the dome tent in the garden, and we camped out. It was just the two of us in the tent. And that night it was full moon. It was the beginning. It was the beginning, the first day of Tabernacles. And on the Hebrew calendar, it's a full moon at the beginning of Tabernacles. And that night I had a vision where I was actually taken up by the Spirit. If I had to, I was picked up, literally picked up, and I could see myself leaving the ground. I was taken to a place, and I heard an African woman crying out, and I was taken to a place. I knew I was going to go and meet somebody, and I was taken to this place, and I was set down in a typical African village in open space, and I knew I had to wait for somebody, and I was waiting for the meeting. And then a man and a woman approached me. And somehow in the spirit, I knew it was Jesus. I didn't know who the woman was, but it was Jesus. And yeah, but it was a man. It was, a normal person, young guy, um, probably in his mid-30s. And but I knew it was Jesus in my vision. And I just kneeled down and I said, Lord, I just want to pray. Let me help these people. I heard the screaming. I said, let me help these people. And he just knelt down and touched me, and he said nothing. It's the thing that he just said absolutely nothing. I said, and then the vision ended, and I was always amazed at this thing. But it was on the 21st of October of 2020, and it was the beginning of Tabernacles. So now we've got Ezekiel's story, which seems to be beginning of Tabernacles. You've got the 7 days, and then in the plain. From the plain meeting onwards, you count the 390, brings it exactly to your date, the end of October, end of the 390. And then we've got the 40 that brings us to the middle of December. And then we've got the wedding, bringing us to the end of, well, let's just call it the 50 days. So we've got the wedding and the 40 days. And that ends, the 40 days ends at the end of January. You've got it as 31 January.
Oh yeah, I got
On
the
your end of your
Holy Ghost at the 30.
yeah. So I'm taking the full 50 days. So you got the 7, the 40, and the 3,
Yep.
and then you're bringing it to the end of January. And I think you've got 31, but I've got it as 50 after the end of the 430. If I take 50 days, so from the 10th of December, and you take 50 days, it brings me to the 30th of January. Now, I'll take you to another story that happened to me where my life turned around. I'll never forget that night. It was the 29th of January, 2015. It was a night when I was alone. We live in the countryside on a farm. And I was alone. My family was in another town where the children went to school. And I was attacked, and I was shot at point blank from about 3 meters. Some burglars were burgling. I was outside. They shot me at me from 3 meters away. The bullet went straight through me, in the one side, out the other side, through my abdomen. There's a couple of miracles that happened, but one of them was that bullet never touched a single critical organ. It went through, and they did nothing to me. They literally just gave me some antibiotics in case of infection, but the bullet, I could see the entry hole and the exit hole, and nothing, absolutely nothing, no intestinal damage, no internal organ damage at all.
That's amazing.
Just an inlet and an outlet. And
That's just amazing.
that happened at about 10:30 in the evening. Out, and it was January 29th, about 10:30 in the evening. They tied me up. They packed all my stuff in my own vehicle. To cut a long story short, I managed to get free. I managed to stop them. I managed to get them to flee. They left everything. They left the vehicle, and everything that they packed in the vehicle, they left, and they ran away. But before they ran away, they stopped in the bushes, and they turned, and there were 3 of them, and they literally emptied out their magazines at me. I was lying on the ground, on the veranda, flat on the ground, but they emptied out the magazine. Probably about 30 rounds were emptied out in my direction. Not a single one hit me. There were some that were very close, and there were a couple of miracles there in itself. So I had my own little mini war on that night. Now that was after after they ransacked. It would have been the 30th of January, and it would have been around about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on the 30th of January. So this is now stayed in my, has been a significant event since then, and it was a big time of a massive change in my life. It was from that point in time that I really started getting into the Word. From the 15th of, from 2015, from that January 2015 onwards is where not only in our marriage, but in my life, everything started turning around.
Wow.
I came across Ministry Revealed about a year later. It would have been around about the same time.
3 years later, early 2018.
As when I came across Ministry Revealed, I started understanding who the gospel was speaking to, and the understanding, opening the books and I experienced a lot of that as it was going along. It was not right in the beginning of the stages, but the books were beginning to open up, and we were starting to understand all those things. So I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of that whole process of understanding all of those things as it was opening up to us, and the understanding became clearer and clearer and clearer as we went along. So when these dates come along, and I see that middle of December, and I'll share one other thing that's important for us in terms of in our country. But anyway, 10th of December and 50 days later brings me to the 29th/30th of January, and I say to myself, it's like you.
Yeah.
Man, is that the beginning? Is that the beginning of tribulation? Where I had my own little mini war?
Yeah.
Is that where the war? Is that where the world is going to enter into Third World War? And I never made those connections before. I never thought to myself, oh, but that's connected to the beginning of tribulation. I'm just saying to you, in terms of these current dates, in terms of the Ezekiel's 430 days, in terms of where we're looking at right now, and how it ties into the Zendok calendar, how it ties into the Hebrew calendar, and all these things, that would be 10 days after Trump is inaugurated. If we get to that point, I mean,
Right.
things could develop very differently, but it looks like a pretty significant day. Okay. Yeah, so those are personal events that have been in my life that are tying into these dates. Now, does that mean that these dates are valid? No, it just means that there's some actually pretty interesting stuff from my perspective and from your perspective in terms of what's happening in your life.
Right.
And in terms of our best understanding right now, in terms of these dates, I'll tell you one other thing about that's very interesting in this country, in South Africa. If you've ever get a chance, have a look at the Battle of Blood River. Have a look in the Battle of Blood River. It's a story of where a group of Afrikaners. They were white people that landed in the Cape, and they were farming in the Cape on the southern coast of Africa, South Africa. And they were continuously being raided by the native Africans. They were being robbed of their livestock. They were being harassed by the local natives, and they decided to move north. And in the process, they moved north, and they had a number of battles with the natives. But there was one particular instance, I think it was a relatively small group. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was about 300 of them in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in ox wagons and that type of thing. And we're talking about the 1800s, 1850, 1870. I can't remember the exact date. I'd have to look it up. The Battle of Blood River. In any case, kind of long story short, they were such a small group against literally, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 Africans. And they entered into a covenant with the Lord. They made a covenant with the Lord. They said, Lord, if he gives them the upper hand and he brings them through this battle, they made a promise to bring Christianity into Africa. That was the covenant, and it's called the Battle of Blood River. And so essentially, they made a blood covenant with the Lord on the 16th, and that happened on the 16th of December in the year, and I can't remember the year. It's 18 something. I can't remember the year, but I do know it was on the 16th of December in that particular year that they made a blood covenant. So these are like the seed of what later became the Afrikaner nation in South Africa. And they planted, as a result, They did. They did plant the church in this country as a result of that covenant. Later, they went astray, and they, just like the Jews did, and just like we all do, they did go astray, and they lost the plot to a large extent in terms of what they did to the Africans, to the local natives, to themselves. And, that transpired into another war with Britain and all sorts of things. But the point I want to make is they made a covenant with the Lord on that day. And I'm watching that day for something pretty significant to happen for South Africa. Brings me to one last thought. And I don't know what the answer is, but the Lord Jesus said, he spoke about the Queen of the South. He says, when the Queen of the South rises in the judgment to judge the men of Nineveh, who is the Queen of the South? Who is the Queen of the South? And we know there's a link to Queen Sheba, and who was the Queen of Ethiopia. But when in the Bible's Ethiopia today is one small country as a very small part of the whole African continent. But I do believe that in the biblical sense, Ethiopia is the whole of Africa. So is it possible that Jesus was actually referring to the Queen of the South being the Queen of Ethiopia, talking about South Africa, the little group of people in the south of Africa, the south of Ethiopia, the Queen of Ethiopia being down south? There's a number of modern day prophecies that speak about the revival during this tribulation, starting for the whole world, starting in the southern tip of Africa, and from Africa going up into Africa and then up into Europe and the rest of the world. Those are modern day prophecies. How valid they will be, that only time will tell. But yeah. I find it interesting, and I'm watching the 16th of December.
No, okay. Huh. It should be, yeah. I mean, it's not far from the date where, 6 days.
Well, it's 8, you're looking at, that will be in that week. That'll be in that wedding week. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be in the wedding week. Yeah, I think that's good. I think we pretty much covered everything that we wanted to cover. The only thing that I would like to probably delve into is the 1290 days and the 1335. I still don't understand how those fit into scripture, but
yeah. Look, those are definitely time of trumpets. Yeah, different. Yeah, we must maybe sometime we must get into that. But I'm fairly confident that those are all for the time of trumpets.
Trumpets, okay.
Yeah. It's linked to the 2 witnesses, because the witnesses will witness for 1,260 days, and those are all linked to that final 2.5 years after Satan is cast out. It's all at the end. I don't think it's got nothing. I'm fairly certain about that.
Yeah.
But we can definitely have a look at that. I do believe the 2,300 days is got something to do with the time of seals, and it's to do time of this time of the Gentiles. It's linked to that. We see that it's the trampling that Daniel 8 speaks about it being trampled, the sanctuary being trampled underfoot for 2,300 days. We know that the time of the Gentiles, we know that the Antichrist is going to trample over Jerusalem for the last 42 months of his reign. We know that there's trampling underfoot. It's all related to Jerusalem being trampled overfoot by the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And so I'm fairly certain that the 2,300 days is related to the time of the Gentiles, which will be the time of seals. So definitely watching Daniel 8 for fulfillment of some sort in this time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just so super interesting. If the ram with 2 horns and the one horn is higher than the other, that's the Iran and the ram fit perfectly. Iran has got 2 leaders, the supreme leader and the prime, what do they call it, the prime minister, whatever he is. But the one is higher than the other. 2 horns, one higher than the other. I never understood why does in Daniel 8 he speaks about the higher horn coming in last. The higher horn came up last. But the supreme leader has been in there for way longer. He's been through a couple of presidents. or whatever, ministers, I think they call them ministers. Or he's been through a few of them until now. Until now, this new supreme leader that's just coming in now, we're waiting to hear what's happening to Khomeini. Is he actually still alive? Is he in a coma? What is he's happening? And is his son going to take over?
Yeah.
And you know what? If his son comes in, he'll be supreme leader, and he'll have come up last. He'll have come up after the other horn.
Yeah.
And the other horn has just come in as well, because remember they've lost their prime minister in a helicopter crash. He's only been in the seat for less than a year.
Yeah.
And now the supreme leader, which is the higher horn, comes up last. It's fitting so far. It's fitting exactly. I'm telling you, I'm watching it run in terms of those two horns. And if that's the case, well, whoever the prominent horn goat is, I think that may well be another case where that prominent horn is going to take out those two horns. I just don't know who it is. I suspect it might be Trump.
Yeah.
But I can't say for certain. We're just watching to see who it is. Yeah. Somebody's going to take them out. And whoever it is will be that prominent horn.
Yeah.
That one horn goat. Yeah.
All that stuff's happening now. It's just crazy. It's just it's amazing, actually. So exciting time to be alive for sure. For sure. Well, my friend, it's been
right.
I think
Awesome.
It's been awesome. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk and throw some things back and forth, and I've learned some things, and I'm excited. I haven't been more hopeful in a long time about the time we're living. It is stressful for me and my family a little bit, just because of you know, it's just like everybody. It's just something that's weighing on us.
Yeah.
It's like when's it gonna happen? So
yeah. It brings about some stresses in the relationships also.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to make decisions going forward. This last 7 years, making decisions has been tough. Yeah. You don't know how far in advance should I, and you got to carry on living. You must carry on. But you always got this thing in mind. You say, well, what's the point of it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the point? And then you got to say, no, we got to press on, because, like in the past, we might have been wrong, and we might be wrong again, and it doesn't happen, and we might have to carry on. And who knows, maybe something else will be discovered. Personally, I can't see it. I can't see it not happening this year, but I've said that for the last 7 years.
Right. So the question
Yeah.
is this the end of the 70th year, or are we going into the 70th year? So it's,
Yeah. That's another discussion.
Yeah.
That maybe one day we must have that discussion as well, if we want to.
Yeah.
On that whole 70 count, there's some interesting stuff. Yeah.
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 All right. God bless.
Very good. All right. Well, you got your whole evening before the year. It's for us. It's now about 11 in the 11 o'clock at night.
Get some sleep.
I'm gonna go get some sleep now. But yeah, I've got a bit of work lined up that I need to tackle tomorrow. You must, yeah, Bryan, it was very nice chatting to you, and thanks for reaching out. And definitely we must have this again.
Okay.
I will. You've convinced me to have another look at that Zendok calendar again. I'll try and get I've put it aside some time ago. I had a look at it briefly and I put it aside, but I must maybe go and have a look at it again.
Yeah.
And to see.
You know how to find it on DSS calendar?
Yeah. No, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with the background of how it actually came about and all that kind of thing else. But I must go and look at it again.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from Ken Johnson and the Dead Sea Scrolls and that sort of thing, and he put that together, and I just found it, very insightful.
Yeah. Good. Awesome.
All right, man. Have a great night.
We'll speak again.
And we'll be in touch.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Bryan.